The gurney hit the double doors at full speed, and Nurse Tara Sinclair saw the blood before she saw the man. Black tactical gear soaked through at the shoulder and chest, oxygen mask fogging with shallow breaths, two paramedics shouting over each other about a training blast at Holloway Range. Standard protocol would have been to step back and let the trauma team take it. But Tara didn't step back. She leaned in close enough to see the wound, close enough to see what was lodged inside it, and her blood went cold. Because what she saw in that man's chest wasn't shrapnel from any training exercise. She had seen that kind of fragment exactly once before, in a war zone. And the people who built the device that made it were supposed to be dead. Before we go further, if stories like this are your reason for staying up past midnight, hit that subscribe button right now and join the family. Every week, we bring you new cinematic stories that will mess with your sleep schedule in the best possible way. Drop a like if you're already hooked, and tell us in the comments what city and country are you watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's go. Cascade Valley Medical Center sat on the eastern edge of Harmon Falls, Montana, a mid-sized city that prided itself on being practical and unpretentious, a place where nobody asked too many questions and everybody showed up for work on time. The hospital reflected that same personality: clean floors, efficient hallways, a trauma bay that had seen everything from highway pileups to industrial accidents at the copper plant on Route 9. It was not a glamorous place. The staff wore scrubs that had been through the industrial wash too many times, and the vending machine near the break room had been broken for 4 months. Nobody had filed a maintenance request because everybody had learned to stop expecting it to be fixed. Tara Sinclair had been charge nurse in Trauma Bay 2 for 3 years, and she fit the place the same way a bone fits a joint, not because she was perfect, but because she worked. She was 32, white, with dark circles that had become a permanent part of her face, and hair she kept in a tight braid because it was one less thing to think about at the start of a 12-hour shift. She drank her coffee black and her water from whatever tap was closest, and she had a habit of standing slightly sideways when she was reading patient charts, like she was listening to 2 conversations at once, which, more often than not, she was. She was in the middle of triaging a construction worker, a construction's hand injury laceration across the palm, probably needed 7 stitches, probably was going to argue about it when the radio on the charge desk crackled and dispatch announced a priority transfer inbound. Military patient, blast injury. ETA, 4 minutes. The construction worker looked up. Blast injury sounds worse than mine. Probably is, Tara said, and handed him a gauze pad. Hold this. Apply pressure. Someone will be right with you. She moved to the trauma bay doors before the sentence was finished. Dr. Renata Howell was already there, snapping on gloves with the efficiency of someone who had done it 10,000 times. Dr. Howell was the chief trauma surgeon at Cascade Valley, 51, sharp-faced, with reading glasses she never used for reading, and a reputation she defended like a border collie defends its yard. She was brilliant, and she knew it, which would have been fine if she stopped there, but she didn't stop there. She had a way of treating the nursing staff like furniture that happened to occasionally speak, and she had a particular problem with Tara Sinclair. I want Lopez on the chest tray, Dr. Howell said, not looking up, and tell Sinclair to stay on the perimeter until I assess. Tara was standing 6 feet away. She heard it. She let it go. Paramedics came in fast, gurney wheels shrieking against the tile, and that was when Tara saw the blood and the gear and the man inside both of them. Military. Late 20s or early 30s. The kind of build that takes years of structured punishment to develop. The blast pattern on his vest suggested proximity, detonation, close range, uncontrolled, not the clean pressure wave signature of a standard training charge. His oxygen mask was fogging unevenly, which meant his breathing was compromised. Left side, she noted, watching his chest. His left side was rising wrong. Vitals, Dr. Howell said. BP 80/50 and dropping, the paramedic reported. Pulse 122. GCS 12 on scene. dropped to 10 in transit. Blast injury to the left chest and shoulder. Uncontrolled hemorrhage at the minus. I can see where the hemorrhage is, Dr. Howell said. Get me a chest film. And someone get this gear off him. Team moved. Tara moved with them, taking the patient's right side, her hands already working on the tactical vest side release before anyone had assigned her the task. The moment the vest came free, she saw it not the wound itself, but the edge of something inside the wound. Something that caught the trauma bay lights and threw them back at a specific angle. Metal. Machined metal. The kind that wasn't supposed to be in a training range. She stopped, just for a second. Just long enough for the freeze to pass through her and leave something colder in its place. Sinclair. Dr. Howell's voice had that particular edge that meant you are testing my patience. I need the chest tray, not a statue. Tara moved. She got the chest tray. She positioned herself where she could see the wound. The soldier's name, according to the transfer paperwork clipped to the gurney, was Petty Officer Marcus Webb, United States Navy. He was assigned to SEAL Team 7, and the incident report listed the cause of injury as detonation of training ordnance during scheduled exercise at Holloway Range. 1,340 hours. Standard language. Clean, institutional language. The kind designed to say everything's necessary and nothing more. Tara read it twice while the team worked. Training ordnance at Holloway Range. She knew Holloway. Every medical professional within 50 miles knew Holloway. The military had been using it for joint exercises for 12 years. And the range had a meticulous safety record because they spent a great deal of effort maintaining it. Training charges at Holloway were controlled, documented, and designed to simulate without destroying. They did not produce the kind of fragment she had just seen in Marcus Webb's chest. Film's up, someone called. Dr. Howell moved to the light box. Tara moved to Marcus Webb's side and looked at the wound with the careful, neutral expression she had practiced for 3 years. Beneath that expression, her mind was running a different program entirely. The metal in the wound was approximately 40 millimeters in length, partially embedded in the lateral chest wall, angled toward the pleural space. Irregular on one end, machine precise on the other. The precise end had a specific taper, a shape she had not seen in any training device she had encountered in her time as a civilian nurse, but that she had seen exactly once before, in a field report and then in person, in a place she did not speak about to anyone at Cascade Valley Medical Center. Kept her face neutral. She kept her hands steady, and she started thinking. Pneumothorax, Dr. Howell announced from the light box. Left side, partial. I want a chest tube setup ready. And where the hell is my thoracic? On call 5 minutes out, Lopez said. 5 minutes. Dr. Howell turned back to the patient with the expressions of someone who considered 5 minutes an insult. Fine, we manage until he arrives. Tara checked Marcus Webb's pulse manually, fingers against his wrist, while she watched his face. His lips were showing the first edge of cyanosis. His respirations were wrong, not just fast, but asymmetrical, the left chest moving less than the right with each breath. Tension pneumothorax, she thought. Not developing. Developed. Dr. Howell, she said. Chest tube setup, Sinclair. His left side has... I said chest tube setup. Tara began prepping the chest tube setup. She also, while doing it, kept watching Marcus Webb's face and his chest, counted breaths. She counted the seconds between them. She watched the oxygen saturation on the monitor above his head drop from 91 to 88 while she arranged equipment. When it dropped to 86, she stopped arranging equipment. He's tensioning, she said. Dr. Howell looked up from the chart she had been reviewing with an expression that could have lit wood on fire. Excuse me? Tension pneumothorax. He's tensioning. Left side. If we wait for the thoracic's consult, he's going to code before. I have been reading chest films for 23 years, Nurse Sinclair. Then you saw the tracheal deviation. A beat. A very specific kind of beat, the kind where someone needs a moment to decide whether to admit something or escalate. Dr. Howell looked at the monitor, looked at Marcus Webb, looked back at the monitor as the saturation ticked down to 84. Get me a large bore needle, she said. 14 gauge. Already have it, Tara said. And she did. Dr. Howell performed the emergency needle decompression with the speed and precision she was capable of when she stopped performing and started working. The rush of air, the immediate improvement in the saturation reading, the visible ease in Marcus Webb's chest. It took less than 90 seconds. Color started coming back before the minute was up. Nobody said Tara was right. Nobody looked at her and acknowledged what had just happened. The monitor beeped steadily, climbing back toward normal, and the team moved on to the next phase of treatment, the way medical teams do forward. Always forward. No time to stop and name the moment you just prevented. Tara moved with them. She also, while moving, positioned herself close enough to get a clear look at the metal fragment before the thoracic surgeon arrived and the wound access changed. She looked at the taper. She looked at the angle. She committed what she saw to memory with the deliberate practiced focus of someone who had learned to remember things quickly under conditions that didn't allow for note-taking. Then she stepped out of the trauma bay, walked to the charge desk, picked up her personal cell phone, and made a call. It rang 3 times. "Rourke line is dead," said the voice on the other end. Male, professional, guarded, in the way of people who answer phones they don't know. "Who's calling?" "Specialist Sinclair, former 3rd Medical Battalion, attached to Task Force Recon. Need a contact at Raven Ridge EOD." Silence. "Then who told you this number?" "A man named Garrett, 4 years ago. He said if I ever saw the signature again, call." Another silence, longer this time. "What signature?" "The Meridian taper," Tara said quietly, keeping her back to the hallway. "I'm looking at it right now. It's inside a Navy SEAL who was just transported from Holloway Range." The silence after that was a different kind. Heavy. Alert. "Don't touch it," the voice said. "Don't let anyone remove it. We're going to need that fragment intact." "Understood. We'll have someone there in..." "There's something else." Tara watched the trauma bay doors through the glass partition. "The incident report says training ordnance, but the blast pattern on his gear isn't consistent with training charge deployment. Someone was standing close enough to the device when it went off that they should have died. The geometry doesn't work for an accident." The voice said nothing for 4 full seconds. "I'll make the contact," he said finally. "Stay available." Tara ended the call and put her phone in her pocket. She stood at the charge desk for a moment, looking at nothing in particular, letting her hands be still. Her hands were good at being still. She'd learned that in a different life, in places where stillness wasn't just composure, it was the difference between staying alive and not. She went back into the trauma bay. Dr. Howell was finishing her notes for the thoracic consult, and she looked up when Tara came through the doors with the particular attention of someone who had been thinking in the interim. "Where did you go?" "Charge desk. Clarifying transfer documentation." Dr. Howell studied her for a moment. "You were on your phone?" "Yes. Personal calls during active trauma aren't." It was related to the patient. The temperature in the room shifted. It was a subtle, a quality of attention from the other staff members, the specific silence of people who have decided to work harder at looking busy. "Related to the patient," Dr. Howell repeated, her voice in the careful precision of someone carrying a procession, someone setting up the next thing they're going to say. "You made a personal call about a military patient." "I made a relevant call." "To whom?" Tara looked at her directly. "Prefer to explain that when there's more information." Dr. Howell set down her pen with a controlled motion that was louder than it needed to be. "Nurse Sinclair, I don't know what your imagination has constructed about this situation, but this is a trauma bay, not a conspiracy novel. We have a patient with a blast injury sustained in a military training exercise. That is a straightforward." "The tracheal deviation wasn't straightforward," Tara said. The words came out flat, not aggressive flat. The kind of flat that carries weight because it isn't trying to. Dr. Howell's face changed. "Not by much. Around the mouth mostly." Picked her pen back up. "Get back to your station," she said. Tara went back to her station. For the next 40 minutes, she ran her bay the way she always did, efficiently, without excess movement, anticipating needs before they were voiced. She got Marcus Webb stabilized ahead of the thoracic surgeon's arrival, prepped the surgical suite the way Dr. Howell liked it, even though nobody had asked her to, and handled the intake paperwork on two additional patients who came in during that window. She did all of this while thinking about metal and geometry and a name she hadn't spoken in 4 years. The thoracic surgeon, Dr. Kenji Mura, arrived 18 minutes into that window. He was good, careful, and methodical, not flashy, the kind of surgeon who made you feel safe because he seemed utterly unsurprised by everything. He reviewed the imaging, reviewed the needle decompression notation, and looked at Tara when he read the timeline. This was identified early, he said. Yes, Tara said. He nodded once and went into scrub. The surgery on Marcus Webb lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes. Tara was not in the room. She was on shift in the trauma bay, but she tracked the updates the way she always tracked things, through the half sentences that came over the intercom, the supply requests, the blood product orders, normal thoracic work, until the last 40 minutes when Dr. Mura requested a specific set of micro-extraction tools that made Tara pay closer attention. Professionally, he was going after the fragment. She had asked him not to remove it without her present. She had not had an opportunity to ask Dr. Mura specifically, and now she was standing in a trauma bay with 2 other patients between her and the OR. She picked up the internal line and called the OR. Scrub nurse answered. Tell Dr. Mura that the fragment from the chest cavity needs to go directly to evidence isolation, not the standard foreign body container, Tara said. Chain of custody matters. Evidence isolation? The scrub nurse sounded uncertain. That's not a standard. I know it's not standard. Please tell him. A pause. Then the sound of muffled communication. Then Dr. Mura's voice, not through the phone, but through the OR intercom system that Tara could hear from the hallway. Tell Sinclair I heard her, and tell her she has 2 minutes to explain to me what I'm holding before I make my own call. Tara was out of the trauma bay in 30 seconds. She changed into surgical coverings in the scrub room faster than was comfortable and pushed through the OR door while Dr. Mura was still waiting, with the fragment held in a titanium cup. The room paused around him with the particular tension of people who are suspended mid-procedure. The fragment was out. Clean extraction, Mura was good. She'd been right about that. Sat in the titanium cup under the surgical lights, and, in that context, with better illumination than the trauma bay had offered, the meridian taper was unmistakable. What am I looking at? Dr. Mura said. His voice was even. He'd been a trauma surgeon for 19 years. Not much rattled him. Tara looked at the fragment for 3 seconds. Then she looked at Dr. Mura. A weapon component, she said. Not training ordnance. A weapon component from a specific manufacturing signature that I've seen before. Where? In a federal investigation. 4 years ago. Dr. Mura looked at the fragment. Looked at Tara. You were a nurse 4 years ago? No, she said. He didn't ask the follow-up. Something in her face told him not to. What do you need? Sealed container. Non-porous. Don't let it touch anything organic. I'm going to need to document the chain of custody from this point. Done. He handed the cup to his scrub nurse with instructions. Then he looked back at Tara. Is this patient safe? For now. The threat wasn't to him specifically. She paused, because the next sentence was one she had not said out loud in years, and saying it in an operating room in Harmon Falls, Montana felt strange in a way she didn't have a word for. The threat was to the people with him. She left the OR before he could ask anything else. In the hallway outside the surgical suite, she stood with her back against the wall for approximately 15 seconds. She pressed her palms flat against the cool painted concrete. She breathed. Then she straightened up and went back to her bay because there were patients and there was work, and because standing still in hallways had never fixed anything in her life. It was 2 hours later when Dr. Howell found her. Tara was writing up the shift incident report at the charge desk routine notation. Nothing that referenced the phone call or the fragment or the OR conversation. When Dr. Howell came to stand beside the desk, with the posture of someone who has been working up to a conversation for some time. I spoke with Dr. Mura, Dr. Hautzel said. Okay, Tara said. Kept writing. He tells me you entered the operating room without authorization. I was in surgical coverings. That's not what authorization means, Sinclair. Doctor. Howell lowered her voice, which was somehow more pointed than when she raised it. You also apparently directed the handling of a surgical foreign body without any standing to do so. You've made at least one undisclosed personal call during active patient care. And you argued with my clinical assessment in front of my team. Tara set down her pen. She turned to face Dr. Howell. His saturation was 84 and dropping, she said. And I was addressing it.
You were deciding whether to address it.
There's a difference. Dr. Howell's face did something complicated. Do you understand what I can do to your license? Yes. Do you understand what an unsanctioned contact with military personnel regarding a patient looks like in an incident report? I understand that it looks bad, Tara said. I also understand that the fragment from this patient's chest wound is not training ordnance, and that what I saw is connected to something that doesn't end here. You are a charge nurse? Dr. Howell said, and the emphasis fell on the word charge, the way a foot comes down on something fragile precises. Deliberate, intended to break. You assess patients. You support the clinical team. You do not conduct investigations. You do not redirect surgical evidence. And you do not insert yourself into situations that are above your mindments. The trauma bay radio went off. Both women turned. The chart desk speaker crackled with the dispatch frequency, and the voice coming through it was not the usual dispatcher. It was a military frequency override. Tara recognized the tonal signature before the words resolved into meaning, and the recognition hit her somewhere between the sternum, and the throat. Cascade Valley Medical, this is Captain Elise Drummond, Raven Ridge Joint Operations. We are inbound to your facility, ETA 11 minutes. We have priority clearance from the Department of Defense, and we are requesting immediate coordination with your charge staff regarding a patient received at approximately 1400 hours. Wicks, do not discharge or transfer. Do not move any materials I recovered from the patient. Acknowledge. The charge desk phone rang a half-second later, and outside, through the trauma bay's narrow exterior window, Tara could already hear it low and rhythmic and getting louder. Rotors. Military rotors. The heavy kind. More than one aircraft. Dr. Howell turned to look at her. For the first time since Tara had worked in this hospital. Doctor. Howell's expression contained something that was not quite condescension and not quite anger and not quite control. What did you do? She said. Tara picked up the charge desk phone. Cascade Valley Trauma, charge nurse Sinclair. Sinclair, the voice was female, clipped, professional. Captain Drummond. We have a situation developing at Holloway Range. We need your fragment secured and a classified briefing room cleared in the next 8 minutes. Is your administration cooperating? I'm working on it, Tara said, and looked at Dr. Howell. Dr. Howell, for once, said nothing. Outside, the rotors were no longer distant. They were overhead, and the sound of them pressed against the windows like something that had been waiting for a long time to arrive. Tara had spent 3 years building a life at Cascade Valley's medical center that had no connection to the thing she used to be. She had built it carefully and patiently in the same way she did everything without excess motion. Without announcement, without asking anyone's permission. She had told herself that the person she had been before Harmon Falls was not someone she needed to be anymore. That the skills she had carried out of that life were just part of her history, not part of her future. She had almost believed it. The automatic doors at the far end of the trauma wing burst open, and 4 figures in tactical gear moved through them at the kind of pace that parts a crowd without touching anyone rapid. Deliberate, commanding. First figure through the door was a woman, military-bearing, late 30s, eyes scanning the bay with the trained efficiency of someone who finds what she's looking for fast. Captain Elise Drummond stopped in front of the charge desk and looked directly at Tara Sinclair. You're the one who called it, she said. not a question. Yes, Tara said. Drummond studied her face for a second. There was no warmth in the look, but there was something Tara recognized the specific quality of attention that one trained person gives another trained person when they're trying to figure out how much they know. We found a second device, Drummond said. The trauma bay went very quiet. At Holloway, Tara said. In the Eastern training structure, active. Drummond's voice stayed level. The same manufacturing signature as the fragment from your patient, which means whoever planted the first one planted both. And the Eastern structure has 16 military personnel inside it right now. Tara felt the cold move through her again, the same cold she had felt in the trauma bay, the same cold she had spent 4 years learning to set aside. She did not set it aside. Do your EOD people know about the secondary trigger? She said. Drummond looked at her. What secondary trigger? Devices with the meridian taper have a secondary pressure initiator under the primary casing. Standard EOD approach will miss it. Tara's voice was steady. She did not recognize it as her own voice until it was out. If your people go in with a standard sweep protocol, they'll clear the primary and trigger the secondary. The room around them was completely still. Dr. Howell had not moved from where she stood beside the charge desk. The nursing staff had not moved. The 2 military personnel flanking Drummond had their eyes fixed on Tara, with an intensity that she had no time to address. Drummond reached for her radio. Get me Holloway EOD lead, she said. Right now. While Drummond's call connected, she kept her eyes on Tara Sinclair. Who are you, she said. Tara had been asked that question before, not in those words, sometimes not directly. But she had been asked the shape of it by Dr. Howell and by administrators and by colleagues who saw her notice things they hadn't noticed and wondered where it came from. She had deflected every version of the question for 3 years. She looked at Drummond. Then she looked at the radio in Drummond's hand, and she thought about 16 people standing in a structure in Holloway Range with a device they didn't know was designed to kill them twice. Get me on that call, Tara said. Drummond hesitated, a single beat of professional calculation, and then she handed over the radio. The radio was heavier than it looked. Or maybe that was just Tara's hands which had not held a military radio in 4 years and apparently remembered the weight differently than the rest of her did. EOD lead at Holloway came on in under 30 seconds. His name was Sergeant First Class Dario Vega, and he had the controlled voice of someone who was already standing close to something he didn't want to be standing close to. We've got eyes on the device, Vega said. Outer casing, approximately 30 centimeters. Looks like a modified pressure plate with a detonator cap on the primary trigger. We're setting up for a standard controlled approach. Stop, Tara said. A pause. Who is this? My name doesn't matter. What matters is that you do not touch that primary trigger housing. Not with tools, not with a disruption charge, not with anything. There is a secondary initiator embedded under the casing, approximately 4 centimeters below the primary cap. If you disturb the primary before you neutralize the secondary, you will activate it. Another pause. Longer this time. Ma'am, I've been doing this for 11 years. I know. And the device you're looking at was designed specifically to kill people who've been doing this for 11 years. Tara kept her voice flat and even, not aggressive, not uncertain. Flat, the way still water is flat deceptively, dangerously flat. The Meridian secondary trigger uses a piezoelectric initiator. Charges when the primary housing is disturbed. The charge takes about 6 seconds to reach activation threshold. 6 seconds is not enough time to clear a structure. Vega was quiet for 3 seconds. Then, how do you know this device uses Meridian components? Because I held the fragment from the first device 45 minutes ago. I have a complete manufacturing signature. Whoever placed the one in that structure placed the one that injured your SEAL at the 1400 exercise. Captain Drummond had not looked away from Tara's face during any of this. Nor had Dr. Howell, who had moved slightly closer to the charge desk in a way that seemed involuntary, as if proximity to information was something her body sought on instinct. Sergeant Vega, Drummond said, leaning toward the radio. What is your current setup? Two-man team, standard EOD approach. We've got the structure cleared except for the device location. 16 personnel from the exercise have been moved to the outer perimeter. Tara exhaled very slightly. 16 out. That was something. Good, she said. You need to approach from the north face of the casing, not the top. There's a seam at approximately the 7 o'clock position when you're looking at the primary cap face on. That seam is where the secondary housing connects. You need to get a fiber optic line into that seam before you do anything to the primary. We don't have a fiber optic rig at this position. It's in the main EOD truck, which is at the range perimeter. Then someone needs to go get it, Tara said. How long? 8, 10 minutes. Then you have 8 to 10 minutes. Do not improvise. Do not try a workaround. Get the rig. Vega's radio clicked off. Drummond took the handset back and looked at Tara with an expression that had moved past calculation into something more direct. You identified the fragment on site, Drummond said. You knew the secondary trigger configuration. You knew the manufacturing signature. Yes. Civilian charge nurses don't know those things. No, Tara said. They don't. Drummond waited. It was a trained wait, the kind that creates space for someone to fill, because silence makes most people uncomfortable enough to say more than they intended. Tara was familiar with the technique. She let the silence sit. I'm going to need your full background, Drummond said, finally, after the device is neutralized. Drummond studied her for another beat. Then she nodded, not warmly, not with any particular approval, but with the functional acknowledgement of someone who recognizes a negotiation. They're not going to win in the next 30 seconds. After, she agreed. Dr. Howell, who had been standing at the edge of the charge desk with the controlled expression of a person experiencing something they were not yet ready to name, spoke for the first time since Drummond had arrived. Nurse Sinclair, she said, and the way she said the words nurse, Sinclair was different from every prior time she had said them, though Tara couldn't have articulated exactly how. Not now, Tara said. It was the first time she had ever said those two words to Dr. Howell without a qualifier, without I'm sorry or respectfully or with respect. Just the two words, plain. Dr. Howell did not respond. The next 9 minutes were some of the longest Tara had spent in this hospital, which was saying something. Stood two at the charge desk with Drummond and the two military personnel and waited for Vega's radio to come back on. And during those 9 minutes, she ran the math. She had been running since she first saw the fragment in the trauma bay. The math kept coming back to the same answer, and the answer was not comfortable. 2 devices, same manufacturing signature. One at a training exercise that should have been safe. One inside the primary training structure at the same range. The geometry of that, the placement, the timing, the coordination it required, was not the geometry of an opportunistic attack. That was the geometry of something planned. Something with inside information about schedules and personnel, and the specific layout of Holloway Range. She thought about Marcus Webb. She thought about the incident report that called his injury a training accident. She thought about who writes incident reports and who approves them. The radio clicked. We have the fiber optic in, Vega said. Sinclair still on? Drummond handed her the radio. Still on. I've got visual through the seam. There's a component in there. Small, cylindrical. That's the piezoelectric initiator. Look for a red wire and a white wire attached to the bottom of the cylinder. I see one red. One that might be white, it's discolored. Looks like it got heat affected. Heat affected from what? Hard to say. Could be from placement. Could be age. That was new. Tara turned it over in her head. Heat-affected wiring on the secondary initiator could mean degraded insulation, which changed the neutralization sequence. If the wire's resistance had changed, the standard cut point wouldn't hold. Don't cut either wire yet, she said. I need to think. We're at 11 minutes since initial approach. The range commander is asking for a status. Tell him 90 seconds. She turned to Drummond. Do you have an EOD technical specialist in your unit? Someone with component-level knowledge of piezoelectric systems. Affirmative. She's on the inbound aircraft. 10 minutes out. 10 minutes was too long if the device had any kind of timer component she hadn't accounted for. Tara looked at the wall. She looked at her hands. She thought about the heat-affected wire and what it meant for circuit resistance and what that meant for the voltage threshold of the initiator. Vega, she said, here. Is there visible oxidation on the heat-affected wire? Not just discoloration, actual oxidation. Black or green at the contact points. Sound of movement. Vega adjusting his angle on the fiber optic. Green. Yeah. Green at the contact point where it meets the initiator. Green oxidation on copper meant resistance increase. Significant resistance increase meant the initiator's activation voltage threshold had climbed, which meant the piezoelectric charge from disturbing the primary would be less likely to reach that threshold. It didn't eliminate the risk, but it changed the profile. The red wire, Tara said. Trace it from the initiator. Where does it terminate? Following, it goes to the primary cap housing. Connects at a binding post on the left side. That binding post is your cut point. The red wire is the bridge between the primary and the secondary. If the oxidation on the white wire has degraded enough, cutting the red wire at that binding post should isolate the secondary before you approach the primary. But you need to make a single clean cut, not a pull, a cut. If you pull it, the mechanical tension could still actuate the initiator. Understood. Single clean cut at the binding post. And Vega if the wire resists at all, even slightly. Stop. Call me, copy. Drummond and Tara both stood looking at the radio. The two military personnel had stopped, pretending to have other business. Dr. Howell had not moved. Somewhere in the background of the trauma bay, a monitor beeped at its steady rate, tracking some other patient's entirely separate crisis. The radio was silent for 43 seconds. 43 seconds in a trauma bay with military personnel and a chief surgeon and a second explosive device at a range 18 miles away is a very specific kind of time. It doesn't pass the way normal time passes. It accumulates. Then Vega's voice came back, and it had a different quality than before. Lighter, not relieved. Not exactly, but lighter. Red wire is cut. Fiber optic shows the initiator is inert. We're moving to primary approach now. Tara put the radio down on the charge desk. Put it down carefully, like setting something fragile on a shelf. The exhale she let out was not dramatic. It was small, quiet, barely perceptible. The kind of exhale you only notice if you're standing very close to someone. Captain Drummond was standing very close to someone. How do you know all of that? Drummond asked. Tara picked up a pen from the charge desk. She had nothing to write. She set it back down. I was Army, she said. For this. Drummond waited for the rest. I was a combat medic, attached to a task force that worked explosive threat interdiction. We tracked a weapons network for about 2 years. I left the service 4 years ago. Left, Drummond said. The word was neutral, but the emphasis wasn't. Left, Tara confirmed without explanation. The network we were tracking, the Meridian signature, was one of their manufacturing identifiers. When I saw it in your SEAL's wound, I recognized it. The network has a name? Tara looked at her. I think you already know the name. Drummond's expression confirmed it. Not through any dramatic change. Her face was a trained face, disciplined and contained, but through the absence of surprise, and through the particular flatness that people deploy when a name is raised that they've been trying not to raise themselves. Rourke, Tara said. Drummond said nothing. Victor Rourke. His operation was supposed to have been dismantled. 2 years of asset seizures and personnel arrests, and the DoD report said the network was functionally dissolved. Tara's voice stayed even. Flat. Dangerous flat. Clearly the DoD report was wrong. That is a classified matter, Drummond said. I know. I was part of the operation that generated the intelligence for that report. Tara looked at her steadily, which means either the intelligence was wrong or someone made the report say something the intelligence didn't support, and I'd like to know which. Drummond held her gaze for a moment. Then she said, My team lands in 8 minutes. I want you in a room with me when they do. I have patience. I'll clear it with administration. Clear it with Dr. Howell, Tara said, and something in her tone. When she said the name was not quite amusement, and not quite bitterness, and not quite anything she had a word for. Dr. Howell, still standing at the edge of the conversation she had been unable to walk away from, did not react visibly to her name being used in that way. She was a woman who had built a career on visible control, and she exercised it now, standing straight, face composed. But her eyes moved from Tara to Drummond and back to Tara with the rapid recalibrating quality of someone doing very fast math. Nurse Sinclair has patience, Dr. Howell said. She can't. I'll cover her cases, said a voice from behind the charge desk. Jorge Lopez, the other senior nurse in the bay. He was standing at the medication cart, pointedly not looking at anyone. His tone, the careful neutral of a person who has made a decision and is waiting to see if anyone stops him. Dr. Howell looked at Lopez. Lopez continued not looking at anyone. Fine, Dr. Howell said. The word came out like something she'd had to pry loose. Tara followed Drummond out of the trauma bay, through the corridor toward the conference space that functioned as an overflow meeting room on slow administrative days. It had a wall of windows that faced the exterior parking structure, and through those windows, Tara could already see the military vehicles that had arrived with the first helicopter, 2 dark tactical SUVs, and a command vehicle with antenna arrays on the roof. The second helicopter was coming in over the east side of the building. You could hear it. She sat down at the conference table. Drummond sat across from her and put a tablet on the table between them. The tablet was in a military spec case, the kind with reinforced corners and an encryption chip at the base. I need your service record, Drummond said. You can pull it. I'm pulling it now, but I want you to fill in the gaps. She opened the tablet. 3rd Medical Battalion. Task Force Recon Attachment. That's a narrow assignment for a medic. I had a specific skill set, which was. Tara looked at the tablet, then at Drummond. I was a trauma medic who had also done 2 years of EOD-adjacent training before I switched to medical track. Task Force Recon wanted someone who could assess casualties in contaminated or device-heavy environments without needing a full EOD escort. Someone who could work a wound and read a room at the same time. A hybrid position, unofficially. It wasn't a designated role, practical necessity. She paused. The field doesn't always give you the specialist you need. It gives you the person who can do what needs doing. Drummond was typing. The Rourke interdiction operation. Your task force's involvement. What was your specific contribution? Medical support and threat assessment. I was in the field when we intercepted the first Meridian signature device. I was the one who identified the secondary trigger configuration. Tara put her hands flat on the table. I briefed federal investigators on the component signature. That briefing became part of the intelligence package that supported the DoD assessment, the assessment that declared the network dissolved. Yes. Drummond stopped typing. She looked at Tara with the focused, appraising quality of someone assembling a picture. You left the service 4 years ago, right after that operation. 3 months after. Why? Tara was quiet for a moment. Not evasive quiet. She had no particular interest in evasion at this point. Not with a Sextant Vice still technically active at Holloway and Vega's EOD team running primary approach. She was quiet because the answer was not simple, and she was deciding how much of the not simple part to say. A mission went wrong, she said. Not the Rourke operation. Subsequent mission. 2 soldiers were killed. I was the medic. She kept her voice even. I made calls that I believed were correct. I still believe they were correct. But 2 people died, and I spent a long time not being able to hold both of those things at once. Drummond held the silence. I left it because I couldn't do the job the way it needed to be done. While I was carrying that, Tara continued, I became a civilian nurse. I built a different version of the same skill set, and I used it here, and I stopped thinking about the rest. Until today. The door opened before Drummond could respond. One of the military personnel from the trauma bay leaned in. Captain, 2nd aircraft is down. Lieutenant Kowalski is en route to the room. Send her in. Lieutenant Yara Kowalski was the EOD technical specialist Drummond had mentioned mid-30s, compact, with the kind of hands that belonged on someone who worked with small and dangerous things for a living. Came in carrying a field case and sat down at the table with the rapid economy of someone who had been briefed in transit. The device at Holloway is neutralized, she said, opening the case. Vega's team completed primary approach 7 minutes ago. Confirmed inert. She set a tablet on the table beside Drummond's. But we've got a problem. The secondary trigger, Tara said. Kowalski looked at her with the specific attention of one technical person recognizing that another technical person has just named the thing she was about to say. You knew about it. I walked Vega through the cut. Kowalski processed that in about 2 seconds. The secondary initiator on the Holloway device had a modification we haven't seen before. The piezoelectric component was combined with a passive RFID trigger. She turned the tablet toward the table. On the screen was a close-up photograph from the fiber optic line, the interior of the device casing, the red and white wires, and beside the cylindrical initiator, a chip so small it would have been invisible without magnification. The RFID trigger was set to receive a specific signal. If that signal had been transmitted, the device would have activated, regardless of what state the primary was in. Tara stared at the chip. Remote activation. Passive remote. No battery in the device itself. The RFID draws power from the incoming signal, which means it's undetectable with standard RF sweep because there's nothing broadcasting from the device side. Someone was planning to trigger it remotely, Drummond said, or planning to let it be triggered by something already at the range. Kowalski zoomed in on the chip. This RFID frequency is matched to a specific signal type. We ran it through our database on the flight. She looked at Tara. It matches the communication frequency used by the standard issue command and coordination terminals at Holloway Range. The room was very quiet. Tara worked through it. The command terminals at Holloway broadcast at a specific frequency during active exercises, status updates, coordination pings, routine operational communication. Whoever modified the device had tuned the RFID trigger to activate on that frequency. Every time the range ran a standard exercise coordination broadcast, the device would receive the signal. The first broadcast that met the activation threshold would detonate it. 16 personnel who had been inside that structure during the exercise were not casualties of circumstance. They were casualties of design. The device had been waiting for the routine ping that would have come from the range's own communication systems, and it would have gone off while they were conducting a scheduled exercise, and the incident report would have called it an accident, just like Marcus Webb's incident report had called it an accident. How many people knew the terminal broadcast schedule for today's exercise? Tara said. Drummond and Kowalski exchanged a look that answered the question before either of them spoke. That information is internal to the range coordination staff, Drummond said carefully, which means whoever built and placed these devices had access to internal Holloway information, Tara said. Schedules, structure layouts, communication frequencies, which means, Kowalski said, we have an insider problem. Tara looked at the photograph of the chip. She thought about Marcus Webb in the surgical suite, about the fragment in the titanium cup, about the incident report with its clean institutional language. She thought about a name she had not spoken in 4 years until today, and about a DoD report that had declared a weapons network dissolved, and about how things that are declared dissolved have a way of reconstituting if the declaration is built on compromised information. I need to make a phone call, she said. To who? Drummond said. The federal contact I used 4 years ago. He ran the investigative side of the Rourke operation. She looked at Drummond steadily. If this network is back and it has inside access to a military installation, the investigative trail is going to run through the same contractors and personnel channels we identified 4 years ago. Your people are going to need a starting point that doesn't require rebuilding 4 years of context from scratch. Drummond considered that for approximately 2 seconds. Make your call. But you're in this room when you do it. Tara pulls out her personal phone. The number she dialed was not stored in her contacts. It was in her memory 7 digits she had repeated to herself every year or so. Not because she expected to use them, but because some part of her apparently understood that she might. It rang twice. Hargrove. It's Sinclair, she paused. I'm in Harmon Falls, Montana. I've spent the last 3 hours looking at Meridian signature components in 2 separate devices, one recovered from a SEAL casualty and one neutralized at Holloway Range. She waited. The network is not dissolved. The silence on Hargrove's end lasted 4 seconds. Then, are you secure? I'm with Captain Drummond, Raven Ridge Joint Operations. Technical specialist is present. Drummond, Hargrove repeated. The word had a quality of recognition. All right, I'm going to need you to sit tight I've been sitting tight for 4 years, Tara said. Tell me what you know. Another pause. Longer, the quality of this pause was different from the operational ones. It had the texture of someone deciding how much they owed another person. The dissolution report, Hargrove said slowly, was challenged internally. About 18 months after it was issued, a field analyst flagged inconsistencies in the asset seizure records, components that should have been in custody that weren't accounted for. The challenge was reviewed and closed. Closed how? Administratively closed. The reviewing officer determined the inconsistencies were documentation errors. The reviewing officer? Tara said. Who was that? Hargrove said a name. Tara did not recognize it immediately. She turned it over, searching her memory of the operation, the briefings, the personnel lists, the chain of authority that had moved information from the field through to the federal assessment. She was 3 seconds into that search when the name connected to a face, and the face connected to a meeting, and the meeting connected to a conversation. She had nearly forgotten about a defense contractor who had been present for a classified technical review that should have been need to know only. Contractor's name was not the name Hargrove had just said, but they had been in the same room. Hargrove, she said, keeping her voice level. The reviewing officer who closed the challenge. What's his current assignment? Hargrove was quiet for a moment. Deputy Liaison to the Joint Training Command, he said, which has oversight of Holloway Range, Tara said. Drummond was on her feet before the sentence ended. Kowalski had her hands on her own phone. The field case on the table was already open, and she was pulling a radio from it with the practiced speed of someone for whom the gap between understanding a problem and responding to it is very small. Tara sat at the table and felt the pieces assemble not triumphantly, not with any particular satisfaction, but with the cold, functional clarity of a person who has been here before and knows what clarity like this costs. She thought about Marcus Webb in his hospital bed, 1 floor up. She thought about Vega at the range, 2 hours of careful work to neutralize a device that should never have been there. She thought about 16 people who had walked out of a structure without knowing how close they'd come. She thought about a DOD report that someone had needed to be wrong. Hargrove, she said, I'm going to need you on a conference call with Captain Drummond in the next 15 minutes. We have a chain from the Meridian components to the Holloway insider access, and now to the administrative review. This doesn't close in Montana. This goes up. I know, Hargrove said. Sinclair. He paused. I'm glad you called. She put the phone on the table. Drummond was already on her radio, and the room had shifted from a conference space into something entirely, something else. Something purposeful and accelerating. The way a river shifts when it finds the grade it's been building toward. Through the wall of windows, Tara could see another vehicle, arriving in the parking structure. Dark, unmarked federal plates. Her shift had started at 7 that morning. She had drunk 1 cup of bad coffee, triaged a hand laceration, and then a gurney had come through the trauma bay doors. She looked at her hands, resting on the conference table. They were steady. They had been steady all day, which was either something to be grateful for or something to examine, and she wasn't sure which, and she didn't have time to decide. The door opened again. One of Drummond's personnel leaned in. Captain, we have a priority alert from Holloway Range Security. Drummond looked up from her radio. The range duty officer just attempted to initiate an emergency erasure of the exercise communication logs. From today's session, the personnel said. Rangeite flagged it and locked the system. The duty officer is currently unaccounted for. Drummond's eyes moved to Tara. Tara's eyes moved to Drummond. The insider isn't waiting to be found, Tara said. No, Drummond said. They're running. She was already moving toward the door when her radio produced a sound that stopped everyone in the room, a short, sharp, alert tone, the kind military radios use for priority override, followed by Vega's voice from Holloway, drained in a way it had not been during the device neutralization. Captain Drummond, we have a casualty. EOD Specialist First Class Rains, she was conducting a secondary sweep of the Western training structure and triggered a device we didn't know was there. A pause, and in the pause, the quality of the bad news clarified itself. A third device. She's alive, but she needs immediate trauma support. We're transporting now. The silence in the room lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then Tara was standing, and she was already thinking about what she needed and where it was, and what the transport time from Holloway meant for a blast injury patient in terms of hemorrhage and airway management, and whether Vega's people had the right supplies for the ride. And she was out the door and moving back toward the trauma bay before Drummond had finished reaching for her radio. Because there were 3 devices, not 2, and someone had known exactly where to put the third one. Transport time from Holloway Range to Cascade Valley Medical Center was 22 minutes under normal conditions. With a military escort clearing Route 9, Vega's team could cut it to 16. Tara did the math while she moved, and the math told her that a blast casualty with uncontrolled hemorrhage had a specific window, and that window and the transport time were in conversation with each other in a way she did not like. She hit the trauma bay at a controlled run, not the kind that scatters people, but the kind that moves through them, and went straight to Jorge Lopez at the medication cart. Blast casualty inbound. Female, military EOD specialist, triggered a device during secondary sweep. Unknown injury profile. Transport 16 minutes is out. I need a full trauma setup, 2 large bore IVs, massive transfusion protocol on standby, airway cart at the head of the bay, and get me a chest decompression kit. Lopez was already moving. You want me to call Dr. Howell. She'll see the alert. She's going to want to run the bay, Tara said. I know. Set up the equipment. She went to the supply cabinet and pulled what she needed with the efficiency of someone whose hands know the shelves better than their eyes do. Chest tube set up. Thoracic tray. She added a cricothyrotomy kit to the cart, not because she expected to need it, but because the device at the Western structure was in an enclosed space, and enclosed space blasts did things to airways that open field blasts didn't. Dr. Howell came through the bay doors at the 4-minute mark. She had her surgical cap in her hand, and her expression was the controlled, purposeful one she wore when she was at her best, when the situation was serious enough to make the political calculation irrelevant. At least temporarily. She looked at the setup. She looked at Tara. What's the injury profile? Unknown. Blast in enclosed structure. EOD specialist, so she was likely suited, but partial protection at best, depending on her position relative to the device. Vega said she's alive and conscious. That's all I have. GCS? Not reported. Dr. Howell put on her surgical cap. You'll assist. It wasn't a question. It also wasn't the usual framing. The usual framing had Tara in a support role, equipment management, peripheral. This was different. Tara recognized the difference and did not comment on it. Yes, she said. The radio on the charge desk updated at the 9-minute mark. The patient was conscious. CS-14. Right leg bleeding controlled with a tourniquet applied by Vega's team. Suspected right side chest involvement. Vitals borderline. Tourniquet notation made Tara recalculate. Right leg and right chest, the device had been to the patient's right. Either she had turned toward it when it activated, or she had turned toward it when it activated, or she had been approaching it from a specific angle. EOD specialists do not approach devices from angles that expose their dominant side, which meant the device had been designed to be approached from a specific direction, which meant whoever placed it had anticipated how a trained EOD technician would set up her approach. That was not a detail Tara had time to process fully, but she stored it. The ambulance came in at 16 minutes and 40 seconds. patient's name, according to the Holloway medical officer, who had called ahead, was Specialist Dana Rains, 29 years old, 3 years with the Raven Ridge EOD unit. She came in on the gurney with one of Vega's people applying manual pressure to the tourniquet site and another managing the oxygen mask. She was conscious, which was the first good thing Tara had clocked in the last hour. Conscious and oriented enough to be annoyed about the oxygen mask, which was the second. "I can breathe," Rains said, from beneath the mask, to no one in particular. "Prove it," Tara said, and took her right wrist to check the radial pulse, while Lopez took the left. Pulse was fast 116, but present and regular. Blood pressure from the field reading was 94/60, which was low, but not catastrophically low. "Right leg tourniquet," Lopez said, already assessing the limb. "Femoral area. Significant soft tissue damage. Right chest," Tara said. She had her hand on Rain's right thorax, feeling the rise and fall. The movement was there, but reduced compared to the left side. Not absent, reduced. Partial pneumothorax or contusion, not tension. "Not yet. Get me the portable ultrasound." On it, Lopez said. Dr. Howell was at the head of the gurney, assessing the airway, and the GC assessed with the systematic efficiency she was genuinely capable of when she stopped performing and started working. Pulls equal and reactive. She's tracking. GCS 15, not 14. Field conditions, Tara said. Vega's medic had probably done the assessment while moving. Agreed. Dr. Howell looked at the right chest. "What are you thinking?" "Pulmonary contusion with possible hemothorax. She's compensating." "I want the ultrasound before we commit to a chest tube." "Agreed," Dr. Howell said again. It was the second time in 4 minutes she had said that word to Tara, and both of them registered it, and neither of them commented on it because there was work, and work was where both of them lived when everything else fell away. The ultrasound showed fluid in the right pleural space, not a massive collection, but enough to be causing the restricted respiratory motion. Hemothorax. Blood accumulating from the blast injury to the lung parenchyma or the chest wall vasculature. Contusion was there too, visible as the diffuse echogenic pattern of damaged lung tissue. But the hemothorax was the immediate priority, because fluid doesn't resorb on its own in a chest cavity the way air does. "Chest tube," Tara said. Agreed. Dr. Howell had stopped saying it like she was doing Tara a favor. She was saying it like someone reading findings off a monitor. 5th intercostal, mid-axillary. You want to assist or minus? "I'll assist," Tara said. She had said it before. She finished deciding whether to say it, and the thing was, Doctor. Howell had given her the option, which was not standard, which was, in its quiet way, something. The chest tube went in clean, Doctor. Howell was technically excellent. Tara had always acknowledged that privately, even when acknowledging nothing else, an immediate drainage confirmed the hemothorax. Blood in the tube, then the characteristic color change as the accumulated blood drained and the lung began to re-expand. Rain's oxygen saturation climbed from 90 to 94 within 3 minutes. "Better," Rain said, from beneath the oxygen mask, with the tone of someone who is being very deliberate about not sounding relieved. "Give it another few minutes before you editorialize," Tara said. Rains looked at her. She had the eyes of someone who processed information quickly and retained it. "You're the one who walked Vega through the Holloway device." "Yes." He said, "You knew the secondary trigger configuration without looking at it. I'd seen it before." "Where?" "Different conversation," Tara said, because they were still mid-procedure, and Rains's leg still had a tourniquet, and the orthopedic consult hadn't arrived yet, and biographical information could wait until the immediate hemorrhage control was stable. Rains accepted that with a nod that said she would be returning to the question. The orthopedic consult arrived 12 minutes into the trauma assessment doctor. Priya Anand, who was excellent with trauma limb injuries, and who looked at the tourniquet site with the spokesman's attention of someone doing rapid triage math. The femoral blast injury was significant. The soft tissue damage was extensive. There would be surgery, and it would be complicated, and the conversation about outcomes was one that would happen later in a quieter room with Rains awake and capable of processing it fully. For now, the priorities were stability and blood replacement. Tara ran the massive transfusion protocol with Lopez while doctor. Anand prepared for surgical evaluation, and the Bay moved in the practiced rhythm that good trauma teams develop, over time not smooth exactly, because trauma is never smooth, but functional, purposeful. Captain Drummond came to the bay door 20 minutes into the treatment. She didn't come in. She stood at the glass and caught Tara's eye, and the expression on her face carried information. Tara held up 5 fingers. Drummond nodded and stayed at the door. Came out of the bay at the 24-minute mark when Rains was stable and moving to pre-op evaluation, and the immediate crisis had transitioned from acute to managed. The duty officer, Drummond said. Did they find him? Found her, Drummond said. Assistant duty officer, not the primary. Her name is Lieutenant Carla Souza. She was in the communications room when the alert flagged her erasure attempt. Range security detained her 20 minutes ago. Drummond's voice was even, but her jaw had a specific tightness. She had a personal device with 3 encrypted messages received in the last 36 hours. We're working on decryption, but the transmission signature match a Rourke network frequency, Tara said. Drummond looked at her. How did you know that? The RFID trigger on the Holloway device was tuned to the range's own command frequency. That's not something you can do without the internal frequency specifications. Those specifications are classified and restricted to range coordination personnel. Tara paused. If Souza was receiving messages from the network and providing internal information, she's not just an accessory. She's the access point. We're treating her as a material witness under military jurisdiction, Drummond said. She's not talking. She will. Tara looked at the bay doors. What about the third device? The one Rains triggered. Different configuration from the first 2. No meridian taper. No RFID component. Drummond pulled out her tablet. Kowalski's assessment is that it was placed by someone with less technical expertise than whoever built the first 2. Cruder construction. Different materials. 2 builders, Tara said. That's what Kowalski thinks. Tara turned that over. 2 builders meant the network had operational depth, not one weapon specialist, but a supply chain, multiple technical assets, distributed construction. That was not what the DoD dissolution report had described. The dissolution report had named one primary technical architect and assessed the others as support personnel without independent capability. The dissolution report had been wrong about a lot of things. Hargrove is on a call with your federal liaison. Now, Drummond said. They want you on it in 10 minutes. I have a patient in pre-op. Anand has the patient. Rains is sedated. Drummond looked at her with the direct, no-filler attention she had used from the beginning. Sinclair, what's happening at Holloway today is connected to a federal criminal network with active operational capability inside a military installation. Your knowledge of that network is not peripheral. It is central. She paused. I need you in that room. Tara looked at the bay. Lopez was managing the remaining cases with competent, careful attention. Dr. Howell was at the charge desk, writing up the chest tube procedure, and when she looked up and caught Tara's eye through the glass, she did not look away the way she usually did. She held the look for a moment with an expression that Tara could not fully read. It was too complex and too new, some mixture of things that had not previously coexisted on Dr. Howell's face when looking at Tara Sinclair. Tara went to the conference room. Call had federal and military personnel on both ends. Hargrove's voice came through a secured audio connection with the particular audio quality of encrypted military-grade communication, slightly flat, slightly delayed, perfectly intelligible. He was joined by 2 other federal investigators, whose names Tara took note of and whose voices she did not recognize. On the military side, Drummond and Kowalski, plus a colonel named Edgerton, who commanded Raven Ridge and who had been silent on the previous calls. We have a chain, Hargrove said, without preamble. The Holloway access Souza traces to a contact we've been monitoring for 14 months. a defense contractor named Aldrich Brennan. Brennan's company holds a maintenance and technical support contract with the Joint Training Command. That contract gives his personnel access to range specifications, communication frequencies, and structural layouts. He paused. Brennan's company also appears in the original Rourke interdiction records. As a legitimate contractor, he was vetted and cleared. He was present for a classified technical review, Tara said, 4 years ago. I remember him. You have a specific memory of Brennan? I remember a man at a technical review who should not have been in the room. I flagged it at the time. I was told he had been cleared. She paused. I was told the concern was documented. The documentation, Hargrove said, does not appear in our records. The silence on the call had a specific texture. The texture of something that was both unsurprising and still, somehow, genuinely bad to hear confirmed. The reviewing officer who closed the dissolution challenge, Tara said. Was he connected to Brennan's contract? He approved the contract extension 18 months ago, Hargrove said. We're looking at whether that approval was improper. Colonel Edgerton spoke for the first time. His voice was the voice of a man who had spent a career in institutions and who was currently experiencing the specific anger of someone who has discovered that an institution he trusted was used against itself. What is the current operational status of the Rourke network? Best assessment. Active, Hargrove said. Not dissolved. Reconstituted, more likely, with new personnel in the technical roles and existing infrastructure in the supply chain. The Holloway devices suggest they've been operational for at least 18 months. 18 months, Edgerton said flatly, at minimum. And the purpose of the Holloway attack? 2 devices at a training range. What was the objective? Tara spoke before Hargrove did, because she had been building the answer since the trauma bay, and it was complete now. Marcus Webb's SEAL team had been assigned to a joint exercise with a federal unit that was active on the Rourke investigation. The exercise was a cover. The federal unit was using it to move investigators through the range without drawing attention. The SEAL team was incapacitated. The exercise would have been suspended, and the federal unit would have been recalled. She paused. The devices weren't targeting 60 trained personnel. They were targeting 4 specific people embedded in that exercise. The 16 were collateral coverage, make it look like a broad attack to obscure the specific target. The silence on the call was longer this time. You're saying someone in the network identified a federal investigation unit, Drummond said slowly, and used the Holloway access to stage an attack that looked like a mass incident. That's what the device placement geometry says, Tara said. The first device, the one that injured Marcus Webb, was at the specific location. The joint exercise was scheduled to move through at 1400 hours. That timing was in the internal schedule. The RFID trigger on the second device was tuned to the range's own communication frequency, which would have broadcast at the start of each coordination cycle every 40 minutes during an active exercise. The duty officer would have initiated the coordination cycle, Kowalski said from across the table. Sousa. She was the trigger. Passively, Tara said. She didn't have to do anything active after the devices were placed. She just had to run her normal duty cycle, and the broadcast from her own terminal would have initiated the RFID trigger. She knew, Drummond said, almost certainly, but she may not have known exactly what she was triggering. The network compartmentalizes. Hargrove's voice came back. We're moving to detain Brennan in the next 2 hours. Federal warrant is being processed now. He paused. Sinclair, I need you to provide a formal statement documenting your identification of the Meridian signature, your knowledge of the secondary trigger configuration, and your recollection of Brennan's presence at the technical review. That statement becomes part of the evidentiary package for the warrant. I can do that. It will be used in federal proceedings. You understand that means your previous service history becomes part of the record. I understand, Tara said. She understood that it meant the version of herself she had built in Harmon Falls, the civilian nurse, the charge nurse, person who had no military past and no classified history and no connection to federal weapons investigations was going to be a version that other people would know was not the whole picture. She understood that the staff at Cascade Valley Medical Center and Dr. Howell specifically would learn things about Tara Sinclair that Tara Sinclair had spent 3 years not telling them. She had made that calculation approximately in the trauma bay when she first picked up the radio. She had just not finished it until now. "All right," Hargrove said. "We'll have an agent at the hospital within the hour. Drummond, I'll need Kowalski's device analysis as part of the package as well." "Already compiling," Kowalski said. The call ended. The conference room settled into the particular quiet of people who have just processed a significant volume of information and are individually absorbing their portions of it. Colonel Edgerton stood and looked at Tara with the expression of a military officer who has spent the last hour watching a civilian-charged nurse dismantle several of his institutional assumptions. He did not say anything immediately. He appeared to be selecting his words with care. "You identified this," he said finally. "From a wound. From a metal fragment in a wound," Tara said. "I had context. Without the context, it would have been just a piece of metal and the secondary trigger. The cut procedure you walked Vega through. I had the configuration in my memory. I hadn't used it in 4 years, but it was there." Edgerton nodded slowly. It was the nod of someone filing information away. "You're going to get a phone call," he said. "In the next few days, once this is processed, someone above my pay grade is going to want to have a conversation with you." "About what?" "About whether a civilian charge nurse in Harmon Falls, Montana, is the best use of your particular set of capabilities." Tara looked at him. "I'm good at my job here. I don't doubt it." He picked up his cover from the table. "That's not what I said." He left the room. Drummond gathered her materials. She paused at the door and turned back to Tara with the direct, unvarnished attention she had used all day. "For what it's worth," she said, "the way you moved in there, the bay, the OR, the call with Vega. You didn't hesitate." "I hesitated," Tara said. "In the trauma bay, when I first saw the fragment, I froze for about a second." Drummond considered that. "A second isn't hesitation. A second is processing." She left. Tara sat alone at the conference table for a moment. Just a moment. She did not have the luxury of extended moments today. She looked at the wall of windows and the parking structure and the vehicles that had arrived and would presently depart and carry with them the sequence of events that had started with a gurney through the trauma bay doors. Then she got up and went back to her bay. Because Raines was in pre-op and Marcus Webb was 1 floor up, and she still had 6 hours left on her shift. She was writing up the Raines admission notes at the charge desk when Dr. Howell came to stand beside her. Not in the usual way, not with the adversarial positioning of someone preparing a correction or a reprimand. She stood beside the desk and the way have something stands, and deciding whether to say it or how. Tara kept writing. "The needle decompression, Dr. Howell said, this morning. She stopped. When I was taking a moment to assess." Tara waited. You were right about the timeline," Dr. Howell said. The saturation was moving fast. "If we had waited another 90 seconds for my assessments up to complete, the outcome might have been different." Tara set down her pen. She turned to look at Dr. Howell. "The outcome was fine," she said, "because you didn't wait. Because we moved when we needed to." Dr. Howell held her gaze with an expression that was doing several things at once, none of them comfortable for the person wearing it. "I'm going to pull my formal complaint," she said. "The one about the unauthorized military contact. I'm withdrawing it." Tara looked at her for a moment. She felt no particular triumph. She felt something more complicated, the specific weight of being acknowledged by someone who had denied you acknowledgement for long enough that the acknowledgement itself feels strange. "Thank you," she said. Dr. Howell nodded once and left the desk. Lopez appeared at Tara's elbow approximately 30 seconds later, holding a coffee in a paper cup that he set down beside her notes without comment. He went back to his cart without saying anything. The coffee was hot. It was also significantly better than the charge desk coffee. which meant he had gone to the physician's lounge, which required a key card he technically wasn't supposed to have, which was information Tara did not need and therefore did not pursue. She was halfway through the coffee when the federal agent arrived. His name was Renner, mid-40s, federal posture, a laptop bag, and a digital recorder. He sat across from her at the charge desk in a wheeled chair that was slightly too low for the desk height, and he did not comment on it, and she gave him her statement in 45 minutes with the same flat precision she had used all day. Dates, locations, the technical review, Brennan's presence, the fragment's manufacturing signature, the secondary trigger configuration, the call to the Rourke line contact. All of it in order, without embellishment. When she was done, Renner closed the recorder and looked at her. "You kept this in your head for 4 years," he said. "Not a question." "I kept the important parts," she said. "What made you think you might need them?" She thought about that. She thought about the 7-digit phone number she had recited to herself every year, not because she planned to use it, but because she had learned a long time ago that the things you stop maintaining are the things you lose exactly when you need them. "I just didn't let myself forget," she said. Renner packed up his equipment. He gave her a card, federal, not local, and told her the statement would be processed and she would be contacted regarding any follow-up required. Then he left, and the charge desk phone rang with a routine patient inquiry, and Tara answered it and handled it and moved on to the next thing the way the job required. It was 2 hours later when the alert came through Marcus Webb's monitoring system upstairs. She was not on Webb's floor. He was post-surgical, in the step-down unit under the care of the day nursing staff. But the monitoring alert routed to the trauma charge desk because his admission had originated there, and the alert was not ambiguous. Ventricular tachycardia, heart rate 182, blood pressure dropping. Tara was up the stairs before the overhead page completed. Step-down unit had 2 nurses managing 4 patients, and both of them were at Webb's door when Tara arrived, which was the right response. But neither of them was doing the specific thing that needed to be done in the next 90 seconds. Webb was in VTAC. His face was the color of old concrete. He was conscious, but barely oriented enough to track movement in the room. Not oriented enough to process what was happening to his own body. "Crash cart," Tara said to the nearest nurse, who went for it. She went to Webb's IV line and checked the drip rate and the solution hanging and the last medication notation in his bedside chart. Post-thoracic surgery, he was on a specific analgesic protocol, and the last notation showed a dosing adjustment 40 minutes ago. She looked at the adjustment amount. She looked at the monitoring timeline. She looked at the point at which his rhythm had started deteriorating. "Who adjusted the fentanyl dosing at 1740? She said. The step-down nurse, whose name was Park, appeared at her shoulder. Day shift supervisor signed off. The order came down from. She checked the chart. From surgical. Dr. Mura's resident. Call the resident and pull up his last potassium and magnesium from this afternoon. Park moved. Tara positioned the defibrillator pads while the crash cart was wheeled in, talking to Webb while she did it, because he was conscious, and leaving a conscious person alone in their own medical emergency without a human voice is the kind of thing you don't do. "Marcus, I'm Tara. I'm the charge nurse who was in the trauma bay when you came in. You've gone into an abnormal heart rhythm. It's called VTAC. We're going to fix it." Webb moved his lips. Whatever he said was not audible. You don't have to talk. Just keep your eyes on me." Park returned. Potassium 2.8 from the 1600 draw. Magnesium 1.6. Both low. Both low enough that a fentanyl dosing increase in a post-surgical patient with already compromised electrolytes could push the cardiac muscle into rhythm instability. It wasn't the medication alone. It was the medication plus the electrolyte depletion, plus hemodynamic stress of thoracic surgery, plus a body that had been through a blast injury, and a 2-hour, 40-minute operation in the same afternoon. Get me 2 grams magnesium sulfate IV, push over 10 minutes, and start potassium replacement, 40 milliequivalents, in 100 of normal saline. Run it over 2 hours. She looked at the monitor. His rate was 186. And call the resident to get here. This isn't a phone conversation. She ran the magnesium herself while Park prepped the potassium. The defibrillator was ready if the VTAC deteriorated to VFib. Tara watched the monitor with the focused attention of a person who knows that the gap between a manageable arrhythmia and an unmanageable one is often measured in minutes. At 4 minutes into the magnesium push, his rate began to drop. 178, 163. At 7 minutes, he converted. Sinus rhythm. Fast 110 but organized. Real. Webb exhaled. His color started returning. He looked at the monitor above his bed with the unfocused, slowly organizing expression of a person whose body has just done something frightening without their permission. That was unpleasant, he said to no one specifically. Yes, Tara said. He turned to look at her. His focus sharpened as his perfusion improved, and the sharpness in his eyes when he was oriented was considerable. The kind of sharpness that explained how he had survived what he'd survived at Holloway and still been conscious on the gurney. You were in the trauma bay, he said. Yes, you did the decompression. Dr. Howell did the decompression. I prepared for it. Webb looked at her with an expression that suggested he understood the distinction she was making and also understood it was not entirely accurate. The Holloway device, he said. They told me there were 2 more, and a third. Yes. They've been neutralized? 2 of them. The third triggered before EOD reached it. There's a specialist in surgery right now for the injuries. Webb closed his eyes for a moment. The kind of closing that is not rest, it's processing. When he opened them, his face had the specific quality of a soldier who has learned something he does not like and is making the decision about what to do with it. They told me it wasn't an accident, he said. No, Tara said. It wasn't. The device, the one that got me. Someone placed it. Yes. He looked at the ceiling. Then he looked back at her. How did you know what it was? When I came in. Tara set down the magnesium infusion chart. She pulled the wheeled stool from the corner of the room because this was a conversation that shouldn't happen with one person standing and one person supine if it could be avoided. She sat down. I recognized the manufacturing signature, she said. I'd seen it before, in a different context. Before I was a nurse. Webb looked at her the way a trained person looks at someone they are reassessing. Before you were a nurse, he repeated. I was Army, she said. Combat medic, task force attachment, explosive threat environment. A pause. And after the Army, I left, she said simply. Webb held her gaze. There was something in the look that wasn't quite recognition, and wasn't quite gratitude, and wasn't quite the professional assessment she had expected. It was something more personal than any of those things, and it was uncomfortable in the way that personal things are uncomfortable when they surface in clinical spaces. My team is here, he said, in the building. They came in with Drummond's unit. I know. They're going to want to meet you. They can meet me tomorrow. You're not receiving visitors. Tonight, your electrolytes are unstable, and your rhythm is post-conversion, and you need to sleep. Webb almost smiled. Is that a clinical recommendation or an order? It's a recommendation, delivered with the confidence of someone who just cardioverted you without sedation. He did smile then. Small, tired. The smile of someone who is going to be a long time recovering and knows it. All right, he said. Tomorrow. Tara stood. She picked up the chart, noted the intervention, and was halfway to the door when Webb spoke again. Sinclair, he said. She turned. He had his eyes on the ceiling. What happened to the 4th guy? She had not been expecting that question, and the not expecting of it landed somewhere between her sternum and her throat, in a way that took a brief moment to absorb. What 4th person? She said carefully. You said your unit was Task Force Recon. Recon teams run 4-person medical assets in high-risk environments. He still had his eyes on the ceiling. You said 2 soldiers died on a mission. That's 3 of 4. What happened to the 4th? Tara held the chart. She looked at Marcus Webb's face, which had the particular stillness of a person who asks questions with precision and is comfortable waiting for answers that take time. The 4th person left the service, she said. He turned his head to look at her. His eyes were clear now, the sharpness back, the intelligence behind them, working at something. She wasn't sure she wanted worked at right now. Yeah, he said quietly. I thought so. She left the room before he could say anything else, because she had 2.5 hours left on her shift and 3 follow-up notes to write, and a formal debrief with Drummond scheduled for 1900. And because the conversation behind her had opened a door that she had not opened in 4 years, and she was not going to stand in a hospital corridor and deal with what was on the other side of it. She was at the stairwell door when Drummond's radio came through the hallway speaker. They had patched the military frequency into the hospital's internal communication system during the operational period, and the voice that came through it was Drummond's, which meant Drummond was not currently in the building. The words came through clearly. All units, Brennan's location is confirmed. Federal team is moving to detain. A pause. However, we have a secondary situation. Hargrove's office has intercepted a transmission on the Rourke network frequency. The message contained one name. Another pause. It's Sinclair's. Stairwell door was cold against Tara's hand. The network knows who called it in, Drummond continued. And based on the transmission timestamp, they knew within 2 hours of the Holloway device being neutralized. Her voice was steady and operational and completely without comfort. We're treating this as an active threat. All Cascade Valley personnel lock the building down. The overhead intercom activated 3 seconds later, the hospital's lockdown tone, a sound Tara had heard in drills and had never heard in an actual emergency. Until now. And somewhere in the building, in a room on the 2nd floor, or the 3rd, or behind a door that had been unlocked when it should have been locked, something moved. The lockdown tone had a specific quality that separated it from every other sound in a hospital. Not loud, exactly, but penetrating, the kind of frequency that gets into the body before the mind has processed it. Tara had heard it in quarterly drills, had run the protocols with the nursing staff, had signed off on the lockdown procedure documentation. In a drill, the tone produced a particular kind of organized movement: doors closing, patients being moved away from windows, staff accounting for their positions. This was not a drill, and the movement it produced was different. Tara took her hand off the stairwell door and turned back toward the corridor. First thing she needed was information. The second thing she needed was Drummond, who was currently outside the building. The third thing she needed was to not be alone in a stairwell with an active threat somewhere in the building. And no clear picture of where. She moved back to the step-down unit. Park was already pulling the unit doors to and positioning the privacy curtains across the patient room windows. Right protocol, Tara noted, even as she moved her to the nurse's station phone. Park, she said, account for all your patients. Personal visual confirmation, not chart check, and lock the medication room. Already started, Park said, which was exactly the right answer. Tara picked up the nurse's station phone and called the trauma bay. Lopez answered on the second ring. Bay is secured, he said, before she could ask. Dr. Howell is here. We've got 4 patients in the bay, all stable. What do we know? Network threat. Drummond's team is outside the building. We have military personnel on floors 2 and 3 with Webb, and she stopped. Rains. Rains was in surgery. The surgical suite was on the 3rd floor. If someone in the building was here because of Rourke's network, and if that someone knew what Tara knew about what evidence existed and who could give testimony about it, then the calculus of targets was not limited to Tara herself. Get me a line to the OR, she said. Lopez patched it through. The circulating nurse in OR 3 answered with the controlled tension of someone who had heard the lockdown tone while in the middle of a procedure. We're secured. Dr. Anand is aware. Patient is stable, and we're continuing. We can't abort at this stage. Keep the OR locked. Nobody in or out who isn't already scrubbed. Tara paused. Is there military security on that floor? There was. One of Captain Drummond's people. He stepped out about 8 minutes ago. We were told he was doing a floor sweep. Minutes ago. Before the lockdown. Before Drummond's transmission. Get Dr. Anand on the phone, Tara said. Right now. emailed while the circulating nurse moved. The 8 seconds it took felt like significantly more than 8 seconds. She watched the corridor outside the nurse's station, which was empty and quiet in the specific way that empty and quiet is not reassuring when you know a threat exists and don't know where it is. Dr. Anand came on. Sinclair, the military security officer who left your floor, did he say where he was going? He said he was sweeping the corridor. I know when it was. Did he show you identification when he arrived? A pause. He was with Captain Drummond's team. He came in with the others. Did you specifically see him arrive with the others? Or did he just tell you that? Pause this time was longer and had a different quality. He introduced himself when Drummond's team was setting up on the second floor. I assumed, what's his description? Anand gave it. Male, approximately 40. Dark jacket, close-cropped hair, military-issue radio on his belt. Tara had seen all of Drummond's personnel in the last 4 hours, and she ran them through her memory against the description, and the description matched no one she could place with certainty. Lock the OR door, Tara said. Do not open it for anyone until Drummond personally confirms personnel. Call me if anyone attempts to enter. She ended the call and got Drummond on the military radio that one of the personnel had left at the step-down nurse's station when they repositioned to Webb's floor. Took 2 tries to get through the frequency. Was busy with operational traffic. Drummond. I need a personnel count, Terrace said. How many people do you have inside the building? 3. Kowalski, Sergeant Teller, and Specialist Vance. Describe Vance. Female, 26. About 5'4", short hair. She's on the second floor outside Webb's room. And Teller, tall, red hair, he's with Kowalski on the ground floor. Then someone is in this building who is not your personnel. Tara kept her voice level. Male, approximately 40. Dark jacket, told the OR staff he was with your team. He's been inside for at least 8 minutes, and he's not currently visible on any floor where your people are confirmed. The sound on Drummond's end changed the particular background shift of someone moving fast. Teller, Kowalski, report positions. A burst of radio traffic. Then Drummond, back to Tara, ground floor is clear. I'm coming in, 2 minutes. The OR is on 3. I know where the OR is. Another pause. Sinclair, stay at the nurse's station. You are not a tactical unit. I know, Tara said. She stayed at the nurse's station for approximately 45 seconds. She was using those 45 seconds to think, which was not the same as following instructions. The man who had positioned himself near the OR, who had used Drummond's team as cover to insert himself into the building, had done so with a specific goal. The goal was not Marcus Webb, who had military security outside his door. The goal was not Tara herself, who was mobile and unpredictable. The goal was evidence. Rains was in surgery and could not be effectively reached. But Dana Rains had been the EOD specialist who triggered the third device. Her field notes, her equipment, and the analysis she had transmitted to Drummond's unit before the blast were the cleanest chain of custody documentation of the third device's existence. That documentation was on Kowalski's field tablet, which was minus. Tara looked at the nurse's station desk. Kowalski had set the tablet down when she was called to help with the lockdown. It was sitting in the open, in a hallway that was currently not as secured as it should be. Picked it up and put it in the medication supply closet behind the nurse's station, and locked the station, and locked the closet. And then she found a position behind the nurse's station counter. Then she found a position behind the nurse's counter, gave her a sight line down both halves of the corridor without putting her directly in view of either approach. She did not have a weapon. She was a charge nurse in a hospital. What she had was a phone, a radio, the layout of the building in her head, and 12 years of practice reading spaces under pressure. Corridor to the left was the path to the stairwell. The corridor to the right was the path to the service elevator. Both gave access to the floor from outside the secured unit. Between them, the step-down unit's locked doors were the only barrier, and locked hospital doors are not engineered for security. They are engineered for infection control and patient privacy. She heard the service elevator move. Not arrive move. The mechanical shift of the cable system engaging, which meant someone had called it from another floor. She keyed the radio. Drummond. Service elevator on 3 is moving. Someone called it. Teller is 30 seconds from the ground floor elevator bank, Drummond said. I'm at the main entrance. 3rd floor has no military personnel, Tara said. Your specialist Vance is on 2. Moving Vance to 3 now. The elevator sound changed as it arrived. A floor below, she thought 2nd floor. She heard the doors open. She heard nothing else for 4 seconds, and then she heard movement in the stairwell. Fast, controlled movement. The kind that is trying not to be heard and almost succeeds. The stairwell door at the end of the corridor opened. The man who came through it matched Anand's description precisely. Mid-40s, dark jacket, military-style radio at his belt. He moved with the training-ingrained confidence of someone who is accustomed to moving through spaces without being questioned, and he was oriented toward the oar at the end of the corridor. He was not oriented toward the nurse's station, which was where Tara was standing. The OR is locked, she said. He stopped. He turned. The moment of reorientation, the fraction of a second, where his plan and his reality diverged, was visible in his face before his training covered it. Hospital staff, he said. The OR is locked, Tara said again. And Captain Drummond is in the building, and Sergeant Teller is in the elevator bank below us. She paused. Whatever you came here for, you're not getting it. He looked at her for a moment. He was calculating. She could read the calculation in the set of his jaw and the quality of his stillness. He was deciding whether she was a problem that needed to be managed physically, and she was deciding the same thing about him, and both of them understood what the other was deciding. Step to the side, he said. No, she said. He moved. She had anticipated the move, not the specific direction, but the fact of it, and she had already put the nurse's station counter between them, which meant his fastest route to her required him to either vault it or go around it. He went around it, left side, which brought him past the medication closet and into the section of the corridor where the security camera had the clearest sightline. She had noted the camera location when she moved to the station. She had positioned herself accordingly. He closed half the distance before the stairwell door opened again, and Specialist Vance came through it at a pace that was not a run, but was not quite a walk, with a hand at her side and the specific posture of someone who had just been told where to be and was there. The man stopped. The calculation revised itself visibly. 3 variables where there had been 1, and the geometry had changed. Tara stepped to the side, because Vance needed a clear approach. And Tara was not part of the tactical solution, she was the reason for it, which was a different thing. And knowing the difference was something she had learned in a life she had spent 3 years not talking about. It took less than 30 seconds. Vance had training and positioning, and the man had a decision to make about whether his objective was worth what the alternative cost him. And he apparently ran the math faster than she'd expected, because he did not resist. He put his hands up and he said nothing. And Vance had him against the wall with the specific efficiency of someone who is very good at their job. Drummond came through the main corridor entrance 40 seconds later, moving within the restrained urgency of someone who has been running and has decided not to let that show. She looked at Vance. She looked at the man against the wall. She looked at Tara. You said stay at the nurse's station, Tara said. You are at the nurse's station, Drummond said, broadly. Drummond looked at the man against the wall. She did not look surprised, which meant she had been building toward a specific name, and the name was now attached to a face in front of her. Hargrove is going to want to know how you got in, she said to him. He said nothing. He'll get to ask, Drummond said, in about 3 hours, when we're done processing you. She looked at Tara again. His name is Warren Figg. He's a former federal contractor. He appears in the Rourke Network records as a logistics coordinator, the one who handled component shipment routing. She paused. Hargrove's team flagged his name in the encrypted transmissions an hour ago. He was the one who sent the message with your name in it. Tara absorbed that. Warren Figgs had sent the transmission identifying her to the network and then had driven to Cascade Valley Medical Center and walked in through an emergency in progress and used the chaos of a military operation as cover to get to the third floor. He was going to destroy Kowalski's documentation, Tara said. That would be my assessment, Drummond said. The tablet is in the medication closet. Tara produced the key from her pocket. I locked it when I figured out what he was after. Drummond took the key. She held it for a moment with an expression that was not quite amusement, and not quite anything else Tara had a word for in this context. Then she handed it to Vance and told Vance to retrieve the tablet and get it to Kowalski's secure chain. Took Warren Fig downstairs in the elevator. Tara went with them as far as the second floor, where she checked on Webb sleeping. Rhythm stable. His SEAL teammate sitting in the chair by the door with the watchful patience of someone who had been told to stay and was staying, and then she went to the ground floor and back to the trauma bay because her shift was still running and there were patients who needed a charge nurse. Dr. Howell was at the charge desk when she came in. Howell looked at her, then at the clock, then back at her. You need to eat something, she said. I ate. When? Tara thought about it. This morning. Dr. Howell opened the drawer under the charge desk and put a protein bar on the surface between them. It was the kind that lived in emergency supply kits, dense, vaguely chocolate-flavored, designed for function, and not enjoyment. It's from my kit, Tara said. I know. I put it in your kit when you weren't looking, 6 months ago. Doctor, Howell looked at her chart. Eat it. Tara ate it. Tasted like pressed sawdust and cocoa powder, which was approximately what she had expected. The rest of the shift passed in the way that the aftermath of acute crises always passes not quietly, because there is no quiet in a trauma bay, but at a different register. The acute frequency had dropped. What remained was the sustained, necessary work of managing the outcomes of what had happened. Hargrove called at 1900. The Brennan detainment had been completed. Aldrich Brennan had been taken into federal custody at his company's headquarters in Billings, along with 3 employees who had been part of the component supply chain. His office had been seized, his communication records were being processed, and a federal judge issued a preservation order on the Joint Training Command contracts. The reviewing officer who had closed the dissolution challenge, a man named Deputy Liaison Colonel Harris Quint, had been placed on administrative suspension pending investigation. Quint is going to be the difficult one, Hargrove said. He has lawyers already. He had access to the dissolution report, Tara said, and he approved Brennan's contract extension, both of which look very bad for him. But looking bad and being provable are different things. Sousa, Tara said. She was receiving transmissions on the Rourke network frequency. Quint is in the network's communication chain. We're working on it, Hargrove said. Sousa's cooperation is being negotiated right now. She's a material witness, not a primary actor. She was recruited through Brennan, and she appears to have understood the scope of what she was involved in only partially. He paused. She didn't know the devices were intended to produce casualties. She was told they were surveillance disruption tools. She erased the communication logs. Yes, she did that knowing what it meant. But there's a difference between covering your tracks and knowing you're complicit in attempted mass casualty. Another pause. Prosecutors will weigh that. Not my call. Tara said nothing. She had opinions about what Sousa had and had not understood, and those opinions were not Ventress. And she was aware her lack of generosity was related to Dana Raines, currently in a recovery room 2 floors up with a reconstructed femur and a right lung that was going to be monitored for contusion complications for the next 72 hours. Kept the opinions to herself. Your statement is in the evidentiary package, Hargrove continued. The fragment documentation from Dr. Murrah's surgery is in the chain of custody. Kowalski's device analysis is in. And Fig was processed an hour ago. He had a burner phone on him with 18 hours of active communication records. A pause that contained something that was not quite satisfaction and not quite relief, but occupied the same general territory. It's a good package, Sinclair. It should have been built 4 years ago, she said. A longer pause. Yes, Hargrove said. It should have. She ended the call and sat at the charge desk and looked at the patient board for a moment. 3 cases in the bay. Marcus Webb in step-down. Dana Raines in recovery. The rest of the hospital running its ordinary essential work around the edges of what had happened today, the way ordinary essential work always continues regardless of what happens in its vicinity. Lopez came to the desk to hand off the end-of-shift notes at 1945. He sat across from her with in hand and looked at her with the particular expression of someone who has been thinking about something for several hours and has reached the point of either sex or not. You were Army, he said. Yes. Before this. Before this. He nodded. He processed it. Then the fragment thing. When Webb came in. You saw it, and you knew. I'd seen it before. In a different context, he said, echoing her own words from hours earlier without apparent irony. Yes. Lopez looked at the notes in his hand. I've worked with you for 2 years, he said. I always thought the way you run the bay, the way you catch things, I always thought it was just that you were really, really good at your job. He paused. And you are. But it's also something else. Tara looked at him. It's both things, she said. He nodded again. Yeah, he said. I figured. He put the notes on the desk. The construction worker, from this morning, the hand laceration. He left without getting stitched. He said he had to get to a job site. He stood up, told me to tell you he was sorry for taking up your time. She almost laughed. Not quite, but almost, which was more than she had managed in 12 hours. She finished the shift notes at 2100. The incoming night shift charge nurse, a steady, experienced man named Garrett Osee, arrived at the desk with his coffee and his organized handoff binder and took in the state of the board and the state of the bay and the residual energy of a shift that had been considerably outside the ordinary. I heard there were military helicopters, he said. Several, Tara said, and a lockdown. Brief one. He looked at the board. He looked at Tara. He was too professional to ask the full version of the question he was clearly assembling, so he asked the practical version instead. Anything I need to know for tonight? Webb in step-down keep his electrolytes monitored. Repeat potassium and magnesium at midnight. Raines in recovery will need a respiratory assessment at the 6-hour mark post-extubation. She paused. Both of them have military security outside their doors. Don't let anyone in who doesn't come through Drummond's cleared list. Drummond, he repeated. Captain Elise Drummond, Raven Ridge Joint Operations. She'll give you the list in the next hour. Osee wrote it down without comment, which was one of the things Tara respected most about him. She changed out of her scrubs in the locker room and sat on the bench for 3 minutes doing nothing in particular, just sitting. The locker room was empty, and the bench was hard, and the fluorescent light had the buzzing quality it always had after the maintenance team's weekly service, which apparently fixed and unfixed it in a cycle. She thought about Rourke. Not Brennan, not Quint, not Fig, but the name at the center of it, the man who had built the network, that had built the devices that had brought a Navy SEAL through her trauma bay doors. Federal package was good, Hargrove had said. The chain was solid, but Rourke's name had not appeared in a detention notice. Hargrove had spoken around it. She pulled out her phone and called him back. 3 rings. Hargrove Rourke, she said. Where is he? A pause. The investigation is proceeding. That's not an answer. No, Hargrove said. It's not. Another pause, longer. We have financial records placing him in the network's command structure. We have communication records through Brennan's devices that trace upward to a coordinator. We believe that coordinator is Rourke. We do not yet have a confirmed location or a warrant with his name on it. Brennan will give him up. Brennan's lawyer is negotiating. How long does that take? As long as it takes. Hargrove's voice had the weary precision of a man who has spent his career in the gap between what the law can do and what the law can do quickly. Sinclair, the network's operational infrastructure is being dismantled right now, today, as we speak. The devices are documented. The personnel are in custody or under investigation. Rourke cannot operate without his supply chain and his placement assets. He operated without them before, Tara said. when we thought the network was dissolved the first time. Silence. I know, Hargrove said. She put the phone in her pocket and sat on the bench for another minute. The fluorescent light buzzed. Somewhere down the corridor, a locker closed, picked up her bag, and left the hospital. The night air in Harmon Falls was cold and clear, the kind of cold that is specific to Montana in the shoulder season, not winter yet, but not fall anymore, a provisional cold that has decided to stay. Parking structure was half empty. 2 of Drummond's tactical vehicles were still in the far bay, their antenna arrays, dark now, the operational period concluded. Drummond was leaning against the wall of the structure Tara's car. Not waiting, exactly, she had the posture of someone who has ended up somewhere and is choosing to remain. Her jacket was different from the one she'd worn inside. She had changed at some point in the last hour. Rourke, Tara said. I know, Drummond said. Hargrove says the warrant isn't there yet. The financial records from Brennan's office are being processed. Takes time. She looked at Tara steadily. You're worried he moves before we get the name. He's done it before. He also, 4 years ago, operated with a network that had dozens of assets and a functioning supply chain. Drummond pushed off from the wall. Tonight, that network has lost its primary logistics coordinator, its Hollisway access point, 2 technical personnel, and its intelligence cutout. What's left is the top of a structure with no bottom. The top of a structure with no bottom can still run, Tara said. Yes, Drummond said, but it can't hide as well. She paused. Hargrove's team has a lead on the communication relay Rourke's been using. The transmissions from the last 48 hours are being traced. The financial records give us enough for a federal judge to authorize a location request. She looked at Tara with the direct, unvarnished quality she had used throughout. We're going to get to him. Tara thought about that. She thought about the 4 years between this dissolution report and today. She thought about Marcus Webb on a gurney. She thought about Dana Raines in a recovery room, and the femur that had been reconstructed and the lung that was being watched. Make sure you do, she said. Drummond nodded once. She moved toward the tactical vehicles, then stopped and turned back. The hospital's administration is going to want a debrief tomorrow. The CEO has been contacted by Hargrove's office. There will be questions about your role today. She paused. You want some advice? From you specifically? Tara said. From someone who has watched you work all day. Drummond held her gaze. Don't apologize for any of it. Not the phone call, not the OR, not the tactical suggestions. Don't frame it as going outside your role. You used the knowledge you had to prevent casualties. That's not a violation of your role. That's an extension of it. Tara looked at her. Dr. Howell is withdrawing the formal complaint. I know. I spoke with her an hour ago. Something moved in Drummond's expression, brief, controlled, specific. She asked me how you knew the secondary trigger configuration. What did you tell her? I told her that some people's training stays with them, regardless of what job title they're currently using. She turned toward the vehicles again. Some sleep, Sinclair. The debrief is at 9. Tara drove home. She lived 12 minutes from the hospital in an apartment on the 4th floor of a building on Clemson Street that was practical and quiet and had a window that faced east. She had chosen it because she needed to be close to work, and because east-facing windows meant the morning light came in at an angle that didn't immediately hit the bed, which mattered on the days after night shifts. She put her bag on the table and stood in the kitchen for a moment. She drank a glass of water because she had not drunk enough water during the shift, and she could feel it in the specific dryness behind her eyes. She looked at the east window, which was dark. She thought about a mission 4 years ago, and 2 soldiers. 2 soldiers and decisions she had made that she still believed were correct, and that she had spent 4 years carrying anyway, because correct decisions and the weight of outcomes are not the same thing. She thought about the way Marcus Webb had said, "Yeah, I thought so, about the 4th person." She thought about the fact that she had recited a 7-digit phone number to herself every year for 4 years, not because she expected to need it, but because she had never fully believed she was done. She thought about the meridian taper in a titanium cup, under surgical lights, and the way her blood had gone cold, and the way the coldness had become clarity. She sat down at the kitchen table and opened her laptop. She opened a document and began writing not a report, not a statement, but something more personal, the way people write things they have not yet decided what to do with. She wrote about the network, and about the mission, and about the two soldiers, and about the decisions, and she wrote about a metal fragment in a man's chest, and a 7-digit phone number, and a life she had built in a city in Montana that was entirely hers and entirely insufficient for what she apparently still was. She was 45 minutes into the writing when her phone rang. Hargrove. She looked at the screen for a moment before she answered. Past midnight. Hargrove calling past midnight was not the same thing as Hargrove calling during business hours. We have a location, Hargrove said. Federal team is moving. She put her hand flat on the kitchen table. Where? The transmissions from Brennan's burner phone trace to a relay station outside Harmon Falls. A pause. Rourke has been running this operation from within 30 miles of your hospital. Kitchen was very quiet. He knew you were here, Hargrove said. The transmission with your name in it, the one Fig sent. That wasn't a warning to the network. We've been reading it wrong. His voice was careful and precise, and carried something she had not heard in it before, something close to alarm, contained but present. It was a location confirmation. Fig wasn't warning the network that you identified the devices. He was confirming your location to Rourke. Tara stood up from the table. Fig came to the hospital to confirm you were there, Hargrove said. Not to destroy the documentation. That was secondary. Primary objective was to verify the target. The east window, 12 minutes from the hospital, Clement Street. How long ago did Rourke get the confirmation? She said. Fig's transmission was sent at 17:12, Hargrove said. That was 7 hours ago. 7 hours. She thought about 7 hours. And a man who had run an operational network for more than 4 years, and who knew how to move carefully, and who had his name in a federal package that was closing around him, and who had one significant piece of unfinished business. The piece that had recognized his manufacturing signature from across a trauma bay. Get Drummond, Tara said. Already. The building's front door buzzer sounded. Not the intercom, the exterior buzzer, the one that activated when someone at street level pressed the entry call button. 23 minutes past midnight. Tara did not move toward the intercom. Hargrove, she said quietly. How far out is Drummond's team? 11 minutes. The buzzer sounded again. Longer this time. Then it stopped. And in the silence that followed, from somewhere below her 4-story window, not the front door buzzer, not the intercom, but the building's service entrance in. On the east side, she heard the sound of a door opening. 11 minutes. Tara put the phone on the kitchen table without ending the call and moved to the apartment door. She turned the deadbolt already locked. She had locked it on instinct when she came in, and then stepped back from the door and assessed the apartment with the rapid, functional attention of someone taking inventory of a space under new parameters. She had lived in this apartment for 3 years. She knew it the way you know a place that is yours, not just the layout, but the sounds. The way the building's heating system clicked in the northeast corner. The way the 4th floor hallway had a loose floor tile that shifted when weight moved over it. Xatsansi. The way the service entrance door, when it opened, produced a specific resonance in the building structure that she had always registered as background noise and never as information. Until now, she went to the kitchen. She opened the cabinet under the sink and moved the cleaning supplies to the right. Behind them was a small lockbox, not dramatic, not tactical. Just a box she had put there 2 years ago, when a domestic situation involving a neighbor had made her think, briefly and practically, about whether she was adequately prepared for things she hoped would never happen. Inside it was a collapsible baton and a canister of pepper spray, both legally owned, neither of which she had ever removed for any purpose other than checking their condition. She took both. Then she stood in the kitchen and listened. The building's stairwell was accessible from 2 points on her floor, the main stairwell near the elevator, and the service stairwell at the east end. The service entrance that had opened was below the east stairwell. Whoever had come through it was either still on the ground level or was already moving up. Keyed the phone. Hargrove. Service entrance. East stairwell. How far? 8 minutes. Drummond's vehicle is on Route 9. 8 minutes in a stairwell was either enough time or not enough time. Nut time, depending on what happened in the stairwell, and Tara was not going to find out by waiting in her kitchen. She moved to her apartment door and opened it to the hallway, quiet, controlled. The hallway was empty. The overhead light had the same slightly yellowish quality it always had after 10 p.m., when the building switched to the lower wattage overnight setting. She moved to the east end of the hallway, away from the elevator, toward the service stairwell door. She stood beside it, not in front of it beside it, against the wall, so that if the door opened, she was not the first thing visible to whoever came through. She heard footsteps on the stairs. One set, measured, deliberate. Someone who was not rushing, which meant someone who was not uncertain, which meant someone who had done this kind of thing before, and understood that rushing produces noise and noise produces problems. Footsteps stopped one floor below. A pause. Then they resumed, slower. Tara held the canister in her right hand and put her back flat against the wall. She kept her breathing even. This was not the first time she had stood in a confined space, waiting for something she could hear but not see, and the body's instinct in those moments is to do exactly the wrong thing, to hold the breath, to tighten up, to make the kind of stillness that is indistinguishable from rigidity. She had learned a long time ago to keep breathing, to stay loose, to let the attention be wide rather than narrow. The stairwell door opened. The man who came through it was not large. That was the first thing she registered, not tall, not physically imposing, in the way the movies prefer their threats to be. He was medium height, late 50s, with the compact, organized build of someone who had stayed functional rather than impressive. He had gray at his temples and the kind of face that had spent significant time outdoors in difficult conditions, and showed it in the specific way. Skin shows that history, not dramatically, just factually. She recognized him from a single photograph she had seen 4 years ago in a federal briefing document that had been classified and that she had not been so supposed to remove from the briefing room, and had not removed but had studied with the focused, attentive attention she applied to things she thought she might need later. Victor Rourke. He saw her in the same moment she processed his face, and what happened in the next second was the rapid, mutual recalibration of two people who have both arrived at a situation slightly differently from how they anticipated. He had expected to find her inside an apartment, behind a door, without warning. He had not expected the hallway. She had expected a threat from the stairwell. She had not expected to be looking at the man whose manufacturing signature she had identified from a metal fragment in a chest wound. Canister was up before either of them said anything. "Don't," she said. He stopped. He looked at the canister. He looked at her face. He was doing the same calculation. She was reading the situation, reading the person in it, adjusting. "You're smaller than I expected," he said. His voice was ordinary. That was the most unsettling thing about it. Completely ordinary. The voice of someone who might be reading a grocery list or discussing the weather. "You're older," she said. Something moved in his expression. Not amusement, something more complicated than amusement. The particular quality of a man who has arrived at a confrontation he has been building toward for a long time and finds it anticlimactic in ways he cannot articulate. "You destroyed 4 years of work," he said. "You destroyed a training range and put 2 people in the hospital. That wasn't personal." "No," Tara said. "It was operational." "I know. That's what makes it worse." She kept the canister level. He could hear Hargrove still on the open phone line on the kitchen table, which meant Hargrove could hear the hallway. The fragment in Marcus Webb's chest. The RFID trigger on the Holloway device. The third device in the Western structure, that one was cruder. Different builder. "You're running out of technical assets." He looked at her steadily. I had more than enough. Past tense, she said. Brennan is in federal custody. Fig is in federal custody. Souza is cooperating. Quint is suspended. Communication relay you've been using for 18 months has been flagged and is being traced. She paused. And you're standing in a hallway in Harmon Falls, Montana at midnight, which tells me that the operational infrastructure is gone and what's left is personal. He was quiet for a moment. He was a man who had built things networks, supply chains, operational structures, and who understood that buildings require foundations, and that when the foundation is gone, the building does not fall immediately, but it falls. He understood this in the specific, visceral way of someone who has just watched it happen. The dissolution report, he said. You were part of the intelligence package. Yes. Your analysis of the Meridian signature was the most specific documentation in the package. Everything else could be contested, reinterpreted, managed. His voice was still ordinary. Your analysis could not. So you had it buried, Tara said. You used Quint to close the challenge. You let the report stand on compromised intelligence, and it worked for 4 years. And then a Navy SEAL came through my trauma bay. The loose floor tile at the east end of the hallway shifted. Tara heard it, the specific familiar sound of weight moving over it, and she knew without turning that Drummond's team had come up the main stairwell and was at the far end of the corridor. Rourke heard it too. He understood what it meant. She watched him process the closed geometry of the situation, the hallway, the canister, the sound behind her, and she watched him arrive at the end of the calculation. It was not a long process. He was not a man who extended calculations past their useful point. Put his hands up, not dramatically, not with any performance. He put his hands up the way a man puts them up when the math is done and he is tired, and the thing he came here to do is not going to happen. Drummond was at Tara's shoulder in under 10 seconds. Vance and Teller moved past her to Rourke with the practiced efficiency of people who have done this before and will do it again and understand that the doing of it is the point. It's not the ceremony around it. Tara lowered the canister. She lowered it slowly because her arm was shaking slightly, not dramatically, not enough for anyone to notice unless they were looking directly at her hand, but enough for her to feel it. The adrenaline finding its way out through the path of least resistance. She had been holding it in since the trauma bay. Drummond looked at Tara's hand, then at Tara's face. She did not comment on either. You good, she said. Yes, Tara said. It was mostly true. Hargrove arrived 20 minutes after Rourke was taken downstairs. He came in a federal vehicle with 2 agents, and the particular expression of a man who has been awake for 22 hours and is running on professional obligation, and whatever the federal equivalent of spy is toward a criminal network that has been evading him for 4 years. He was shorter than his voice suggested, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead that he never used for reading. And he looked at Tara in the kitchen of her apartment with an expression that contained, among other things, something close to relief. He came here himself, Hargrove said. Yes, that was a significant operational error on his part. He didn't have anyone else left to send, Tara said. He wanted it to be him. It was personal for him, too. She paused. He said site analysis of the Meridian signature was the one part of the original intelligence package that couldn't be managed. He built 4 years of operational continuity on the assumption that I would stay buried in a trauma bay in Montana and never surface. Hargrove looked at her. What changed? Marcus Webb came through my doors, she said. Hargrove was quiet for a moment. The warrant with Rourke's name is processed. Federal charges are being filed in the morning: weapons, smuggling, conspiracy, federal officer endangerment, attempted murder in connection with the Holloway devices. He paused. There's also a charge relating to the original dissolution report, obstruction and submission of materially false intelligence to federal investigators. That one will take longer to build, but it has Rourke's prints on it through Quint, and Quint is going to need to decide what his cooperation looks like before his lawyers run out of runway. Quint will cooperate, Tara said. He's an administrator. Administrators cooperate when cooperation is clearly in their interest. You sound certain. I've worked for enough of them, she said. Hargrove almost smiled. He reached into his jacket and put a card on the kitchen table beside her phone. My direct line, not the main office mine. He paused. I should have made sure you had it 4 years ago. She looked at the card. She did not say it was all right, because it wasn't entirely, and she did not say she understood, because understanding and absolution are different things. I have it now, she said. He left. The federal agents left. One of Drummond's personnel stayed in the building's lobby through the night, not because anyone expected additional threat, but because the operational period was Nord was not formally closed, and because Drummond was thorough. Tara sat at the kitchen and finished writing the document she had started before the buzzer sounded. It took another hour. When she was done, she read it through once, made 3 corrections, and saved it, without deciding what to do with it. Some things are worth writing before you know why you're writing them. She slept 4 hours. Woke when the east light came in at its oblique, considerate angle. Made coffee. Went to the debrief. The hospital administration debrief was in the main conference room on the first floor, which was a larger and more formally arranged space than the overflow conference room that had hosted the previous day's federal and military coordination. The hospital CEO was there, a composed man named Theodore Marsh, who had the experienced administrative calm of someone who had managed crises before and understood that composure is an operational tool. Chief of Medical Staff was there. Hargrove's office was represented by a junior agent with a recording device. Captain Drummond was present, and Dr. Renata Howell was there, seated at the far end of the table, with her hands folded on the surface in front of her. Tara sat down, noted who was in the room, and answered every question put to her with the same flat precision she had used for Renner the previous evening. The timeline, the identification, the calls, the OR, the conference room, the lockdown. She did not frame it apologetically, and she did not frame it triumphantly. She described what she had done and why, and what the outcomes had been, and she answered the follow-up questions the same way. When it was over, Theodore Marsh looked at her across the table, with the expression of a man who is integrating new information about someone he thought he had a complete picture of. The formal complaint filed against you by Dr. Howell has been withdrawn, he said. That's been noted in your file. I'm aware, Tara said. Given the circumstances of yesterday, the board will not be pursuing any independent review of your actions. He paused. In fact, I want to say formally, for the record, your decisions yesterday contributed directly to preventing significant casualties at Holloway Range and to the neutralization of what appears to be a substantial federal criminal operation. This hospital is we are. He stopped, which was the first non-composed moment he had shown. We are glad you're here, he said. And we're aware that how you've been regarded here has not always reflected what you're actually capable of. Tara looked at him. She looked at Dr. Howell, who was looking at the table. She looked at the recording device on the surface and the window behind Marsh's head and the ordinary Montana morning outside it. I did my job, she said, with a different toolkit than people knew about. Marsh nodded. He seemed to understand that this was both accurate and the extent of what she intended to offer in this direction. After the debrief, Drummond caught her in the hallway. Rourke is processing through federal intake in Billings, Drummond said. Quint's lawyers made contact with the federal prosecutor this morning. He's cooperating. She paused. You were right about administrators. Did Souza give anything on Quint? Enough. She identified him as the person who instructed Brennan to route the component supply through the training contract. She didn't know his name at the time she knew him as a coordinator. But her description and Brennan's communication records together put him in the chain. Drummond paused. The charges against Rourke are going to be significant. Federal prosecutors are estimating a first hearing in 60 days. Tara thought about 60 days. 60 days after 4 years. The mathematics of it were not satisfying in any clean sense, but satisfaction was not the point. Counting was the point. Raines, Tara said. How is she? Awake this morning. Asking about the device analysis. Something moved in Drummond's expression, brief, warm, the expression of someone describing a person they respect. Kowalski is writing up the technical report, and Rains is trying to contribute from a hospital bed with a reconstructed femur. That sounds right, Tara said. Drummond reached into her jacket pocket and produced a folded document, put it in Tara's hand. Colonel Edgerton said to give you this personally. Tara unfolded it. It was a formal letter on Raven Ridge Joint Operations letterhead, signed by Edgerton, addressed to the administration of Cascade Valley Medical Center. The letter described, in formal and specific language, Tara Sinclair's contribution to the resolution of the Holloway Range incident. It named the fragment identification, the secondary trigger guidance, the Rourke network intelligence, the FIG intercept, and Rourke's apprehension. It was not a commendation in the military sense, it was a formal record, the kind that becomes part of institutional documentation and sits in files where people look when they want to understand what happened. At the bottom, in Edgerton's handwriting, were 4 words that were not part of the formal text. We won't forget this. Tara refolded the letter. She held it for a moment. He also said, Drummond added, that the phone call he mentioned, the one from above his pay grade, you should expect it within the week. I told him I'm good at my job here. He told me you said that. Drummond looked at her steadily. He also told me to tell you that the question isn't whether you're good at your job here. Question is whether there's a way to do both. Tara looked at her. Both. The work you do in a trauma bay, Drummond said, and the work you did yesterday. There are structures that accommodate both. Consulting roles, advisory positions. People who move between civilian medical systems and military operations without being fully inside either. She paused. You've already been doing it, in a way. You just didn't have the institutional framework. Tara held the folded letter. She thought about the 7-digit phone number she had recited to herself for 4 years. She thought about the things she had written at the kitchen table at midnight before the buzzer sounded the document she had saved without knowing why. She thought about the way Clarity had felt when the cold moved through her in the trauma bay. Not comfortable, not welcome, but functional. Precisely functional. The way an old tool feels when you pick it up after years in a drawer and find that it still fits your hand. I'll take the call, she said. Drummond nodded. She did not look surprised. Put out her hand and Tara shook it, not the soft social version of a handshake, but the real one, the kind where both parties are present in it. Then Drummond left, and Tara went up to the step-down unit to check on Marcus Webb. He was sitting up when she came in. Not fully propped on the raised bed, the monitoring leads still attached, the IV still running, but up enough that the change from the day before was visible in his posture and his color. His SEAL teammate was not in the chair today. He was alone with a tablet on the tray table that he turned over when she came in, the specific gesture of a person switching from something private to something present. Electrolytes, she said before he could say anything. She checked the bedside chart. Potassium and magnesium both in range. Better, he agreed. She did her assessment heart rate, respiratory sounds, wound drainage, the methodical sequence that is the same, regardless of how unusual the circumstances of admission were. He was a good patient in the specific way military personnel often are. He answered questions accurately and without embellishment, and he did not minimize, which was rarer than it should be. When she was done, she made the chart notation and clicked the pen closed. Rourke, Webb said, in federal custody. Charges filed this morning. Quiet for a moment. My teams said there were 3 devices. 2 were neutralized before they activated. The third, she paused. The third injured the EOD specialist who found it. She's recovering. She's going to be fine, though the fine is going to take time. Webb looked at the window. The exercise we were running. The joint exercise, the federal unit embedded in it. I knew something was off about the setup. The scheduling felt artificial. He paused. I should have pushed harder on that. You were shot by a device before you had the opportunity, Tara said. Before that. She looked at him. He was not looking for absolution. He was doing what trained people do when things go wrong running the sequence, identifying the point where a different decision might have changed the outcome. It was a useful thing to do. It was also a thing that could eat you if you let it. You came through my doors alive, she said. That's where I start the accounting. Everything before that is yours to work with. He looked at her. And 2 soldiers, 4 years ago. Is that where you start the accounting on that? She held his gaze. The question was direct, and it was not unkind. It was the question of someone who had been turning the story over in his head since she'd told him her fraction of it. I'm still working on that one, she said. He nodded. It was the nod of someone who understands that some accounting takes longer than others and that the length of the process is not evidence of the wrong answer. The 4th person, he said. The one who left. Yes, still going. Still going, she said. He reached over to the tray table and turned his tablet back over. On the screen was a search result, not medical, not operational. A news article, 12 hours old, with a photograph. Photograph showed federal agents outside a building in Billings. The headline used Rourke's name and the words arrested and weapons network and military installation. The article was brief and factual, the kind of initial reporting that precedes the fuller story that precedes the story by several days. My team has been tracking this since last night, Webb said. They showed me this morning. He looked at Tara. Your name's not in it. No, it should be. The official record will reflect what happened, she said. That's enough. He studied her for a moment. Is it? She thought about that honestly, because he had asked it honestly, and he deserved the honest version. Honest version was that she did not need the article. She did not need the public account of who had recognized what in a trauma bay and made which phone call and walked Sergeant Vega through which cut sequence. She had spent 3 years being regarded as the difficult nurse who questioned everything. And yesterday, she had been exactly that nurse, and the questioning had mattered. And she knew that it mattered whether or not anyone printed it. That was not the same as saying the years of being dismissed had been easy to carry. They hadn't. There is a specific sustained cost to being competent in a room where your competence is not credited, and pretending there isn't a cost is a different kind of diminishment. It's enough, she said, and it's not enough. Both. Webb looked at her for a moment. Then he reached over to the tray table drawer and produced a piece of paper, a notacard, the kind hospitals leave in patient room supply kits. He wrote something on it and handed it to her. It was a phone number. Below it, in his handwriting, SEAL Team 7 Medical Liaison. If you ever want a second opinion on your consulting options. She looked at it. She put it in her pocket. Get some sleep, she said. You too, he said. You look like you got about 4 hours. Exactly 4 hours. Get 8 tonight. I'll try, she said, which was not a commitment but was more than she usually offered on that particular subject. She left his room and went to the 3rd floor to check on Dana Raines. Raines was awake and eating a container of hospital yogurt with the focused determination of someone for whom eating is currently a task rather than a pleasure. Kowalski was sitting beside the bed with a laptop, and the conversation between them, when Tara came in, had the technical, precise quality of 2 EOD specialists analyzing a device configuration, which was exactly what it was. Raines looked up. Sinclair, how's the leg? Annoying, Raines said. How's the guy from the first device? Step-down unit. Improving. Raines nodded. She looked at Tara with the sharp, retentive eyes that had been there when she first came in on the gurney, even sedated and post-surgical and eating hospital yogurt. The intelligence behind them was unmistakable. Kowalski told me what you knew about the secondary trigger configuration, she said, before I triggered the 3rd one. The 3rd device was differently constructed, Tara said. There was no way to predict the configuration without the fiber optic data. I know, Raines said. That's not why I'm bringing it up. She paused. I'm bringing it up because the secondary trigger documentation you gave Kowalski is the cleanest technical record in the evidentiary package. Cleaner than the field photographs. Cleaner than my own pre-Blasington. Because you put it in a statement before anyone asked you to. She held Tara's gaze. That's not a nurse thing. That's a thinking under pressure thing. The kind you either have or you don't. People develop it, Tara said. Some people. Rains looked at her yogurt. I read your file this morning. Hargrove sent Drummond a partial service record. She looked up. Task Force Recon. Explosive Threat Environment Medic. That's not a standard track. No. It's also not a track people walk away from easily. No, Tara said. It's not. Rains considered that. Drummond said you're going to take the consulting call. Word travels. Military hospitals are like any other hospital. Everybody knows everything. Rains put down the yogurt. For what it's worth, the way you moved yesterday, the whole day. You didn't move like someone who left something behind. You moved like someone who set it down and knew exactly where it was the whole time. Tara looked at her for a moment. The words landed in a way she had not expected them to land, not dramatically, not with any ceremony, but squarely. In the specific place where she had been carrying the weight of a mission 4 years ago, and 2 soldiers, and a decision she still believed was correct, and had not been able to hold alongside the outcome until something in. The last 24 hours had shifted the geometry. Thank you, she said. It was a simple thing to say. It was also the right thing. She left the 3rd floor and went back to the charge desk, where O was completing his night shift handoff with the orderly competence she had always appreciated about him. He looked up when she arrived. Good morning, he said. Morning, she said. How was the night? Quiet, he said. Webb's midnight electrolytes were in range. Rains extubated clean at 0400. No incidents. He handed her the shift report. The military security cleared out at 0600. Drummond's personnel. I know. He looked at her briefly, carefully, with the thoughtful attention of a man who processes things at his own pace. The construction worker called, he said. The hand laceration from yesterday morning. He came back at 0700 and got his stitches. She looked at O.C. He said he felt bad about leaving, O.C. said. He also said to tell the charge nurse thank you for not making him feel stupid about it. The trauma bay was ordinary that morning. 2 intakes, both manageable, both resolved within the standard workflow. Dr. Howell came in at 8 and ran her morning rounds with the focused efficiency that was her best quality. And at the medication cart, she paused beside Tara with the particular quality of someone who is not going to say the large version of the thing they are thinking, but wants it acknowledged that the thing is there. The debrief went well, Dr. Howell said. Yes, Tara said. Marsh was... She stopped. Started. Differently, I should have listened more carefully. In this bay. Over the past 3 years, the words came out with the specific difficulty of something that has been held in a long time and loses shape in the release. I'm aware of that. Tara looked at her. She had imagined this moment occasionally. In the abstract way, you imagine things you don't expect to happen, what she would feel, what she would say, whether it would feel like anything in particular. In the actual moment, it felt less like triumph and more like the exhaustion that follows a long tension releasing. Clean and uncomfortable and real. I know you are, Tara said. So do we keep working? Dr. Howell looked at her. The question was direct and without cruelty and did not ask for more than it asked for, which was the thing Howell seemed to recognize. Yes, she said. We keep working. They kept working. 3 weeks later, Victor Rourke was formally indicted on 11 federal counts. Aldrich Brennan entered a cooperation agreement. 4 days after that, Harris Quint resigned his position and was subsequently charged with obstruction and procurement fraud. Warren Figg, who had no cooperation agreement and no leverage, and an 18-hour call record that documented his communications with the network, was assigned a public defender and a court date. Lieutenant Carla Souza received a reduced charge in exchange for her testimony, which prosecutors described as material to the Quint indictment. The news coverage, when it came, was the kind that arrives several weeks after the operational moment, thorough, researched, built on the federal indictment documents that become public record. Cascade Valley Medical Center was mentioned briefly as the receiving facility for the initial casualty. Tara Sinclair's name appeared once, in a subordinate clause, attributed to a source familiar with the investigation. The source described her as a medical professional with specialized background who identified a critical evidentiary component in the early hours of the incident. Lopez cut the article out of the paper, the actual paper, the Harmon Falls Courier, which still printed a physical edition on Tuesdays, and taped it to the inside of the supply cabinet where Tara kept the chest decompression kits. He did not say anything about it. She found it 3 days later and looked at it for a moment and left it where it was. The consulting call came on a Thursday afternoon, 31 days after the Holloway incident. She took it in the break room with the door closed and her coffee going cold on the table beside her. The call was from a federal medical liaison office that worked at the intersection of military operations and civilian healthcare systems, a specific narrow function that had been formalized after a series of incidents in the previous decade had demonstrated that the gap between military field medicine and civilian trauma care was regularly costing time and outcomes. The role they described was not a return to uniform. It was not a departure from Cascade Valley. It was, in its practical structure, exactly what Drummond had sketched in the parking structure, a consulting position that put her knowledge where it was needed without requiring her to choose between the two lives she'd been living as if they were incompatible. They were not incompatible. She had known that since the trauma bay, when she had done both things at once without being asked. She said yes. She said it without a long pause, without caveats, without the qualified language she had spent 4 years using to keep parts of herself separate from other parts. She said yes, and she meant all of it. She went back to the trauma bay. 6 weeks after the Holloway incident, on a Tuesday morning between intakes, the elevator at the far end of the hall opened, and Marcus Webb walked out of it. Not easily, he had a cane, and the gait was careful, and the right side of his posture showed the composite adjustment of a body working around recent thoracic surgery. But he was walking, and he was upright, and the sharpness in his eyes was fully restored. He was carrying a box of donuts. He put them on the charge desk with the slightly awkward air of a man who has performed this gesture before, and is aware of its symbolic freight and has decided to proceed anyway. Tara looked at the box. She looked at him. "You walked here," she said. "Drove here, walked from the parking structure." He paused, which felt like enough. "It is enough," she said. He looked at her directly. "You saved my life." She had been thinking about how to answer that for 6 weeks, in the background of everything else, the way you think about questions you know are coming. She had assembled several versions of the answer and discarded all of them because they were either too small or too large for the actual moment. "I was doing my job," she said, "with everything I had." Webb looked at her for a moment. He had the eyes of someone who has spent a career in environments where precision matters and who can distinguish between an evasion and a statement of genuine belief. He nodded once, the nod of someone who has heard the true version. "Consulting position," he said. "Drummond told me. News travels." "Still," he said. "Good." Lopez appeared at the charge desk with a coffee, not the charge desk coffee, the physician's lounge coffee, which he should not have had access to, and clearly did. He set it beside the donut box without comment, and went back to his cart. Tara looked at the coffee. She looked at the donuts. She looked at the trauma bay, her bay, with its worn floors and its efficient machinery and its 3-year accumulation of her handwriting in the protocol binders and her instincts embedded in the way the team moved. She had been asked, over the years, in various forms, and by various people, the question that reduced to, "Who do you think you are?" The question had been asked by administrators and supervisors and a chief surgeon who had spent 3 years treating her like furniture that occasionally spoke. The question had been asked by the implicit architecture of systems that sort people into categories and expect them to stay in them. She had spent 4 years not answering it. She had spent 3 years before that trying to leave it behind entirely. She had built a life in a city in Montana and a career in a trauma bay, and she had been genuinely good at both. And the goodness had never required her to answer the question, because was too busy doing the work to have time for the question. But she knew the answer now. She had known it Since the moment she put her hand on a military radio in a hospital corridor and gave Sergeant Vega precise instructions for a wire cut on a device that should not have existed. She was the person who stayed, who learned, who carried the weight of difficult knowledge through years that had no use for it, kept it maintained and ready, and walked into a trauma bay every morning and did the full version of her job, even when the full version was invisible to everyone around her. She was the person who did not need to be asked. She picked up the coffee. She took a sip. It was good, genuinely good, the kind that reminded you why bad coffee is a failure of effort rather than a fact of life. Trauma Bay radio crackled. Incoming. ETA 6 minutes. She set down the coffee and moved to the bay doors, already thinking about what she'd need and where it was and what the next hour required of her. All of her. Every version. Simultaneously. That was the answer. It had always been the answer.